Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to today's big event. It's a kind of the end of the season, although the break from our meetings will be short. I hope there will be something in September too. But today, at the end of a long series of our meetings, conversations and reflections on ancient Egypt, we'll be talking about Ma'at. It's one of the most fundamental and at the same time the most complex topics of ancient Egyptian worldview. I must admit that today is the premiere. I've never read Ma'at separately. Today I have 20 pages of quotes, and at the end we'll be reading all together plus 9 pages, one of the most outstanding literary monuments of ancient Egypt, which deals with the Egyptians' view of life, what they think of justice, of kinship, of the relationship between fathers and children, and how to understand, feel, and realise the great truth of heaven by actions on earth. I traditionally ask you to turn off your mobile phones, switch them to flight mode, and do everything to keep them out of our way. Thank you very much. The worldview of ancient Egypt is an amazing picture that attracted the attention of representatives of other great civilizations of the ancient world. They came here to the foot of the pyramids to try to comprehend what the Egyptians had been creating for several millennia of their history. And for the ancient Egyptians themselves, the idea of Ma'at, of truth, of justice, of harmony, was not just an axis. It permeated their entire existence. That is why many hundreds of thousands of Egyptian texts spoke about what truth and universal harmony were. It was a concept and an idea that united everyone. A simple peasant who walked behind a plough with his oxen in the field, and a great king who went to the sanctuary of his temple. Each of them, peasants, writers, craftsmen, priests, kings, all of them, each of them in its own way was responsible for what Ma'at was. And during today's talk, we will try to understand what the truth of heaven is and how it manifests itself in justice and in earthly harmony. Going a little further, I will say right away that the word truth is very close, apparently, to what the Egyptians put into this word Ma'at. It is incredibly multidimensional for Egypt. What is truth? Truth is when the sun rises on the eastern horizon of the sky, as it did yesterday and the day before yesterday. What is truth? Truth is when the waters of the Nile rise first, then they fall, rise. Then the first rises, the harvest is harvested, the season of drought begins, and later the Nile flows again. The correct change of seasons is also Ma'at. It is also truth. When a person comes to a judge, to his district court, and asks for the truth, the correct decision of the judge is Ma'at. When the king goes from the holy temple to the statue of the deity and tries to do everything from it, depending on the fact that the deity entered the cult statue at the time of worship, he brings to the statue of the goddess Ma'at, the great daughter of the sun, which is everywhere, all-encompassing, a sign that his heart is pure and his actions are such that everything is done at this temple, at this sacred moment. Everything is done for the deity to come to the cult statue and bestow upon the world the grace that comes from the world of gods and that comes to the world of people through the king. But the most interesting thing is that among the texts that speak of Ma'at, there are a lot of living voices, the voices of the ancient Egyptians. And I start with this wonderful shot with the rise of the Pyramid of Giza, because if at some point we forget that this is a necropolis and try to read the inscriptions that are in the surrounding tombs, we will understand that they are not just about life. They are in many ways addressed to the future generations, and there is an attempt of every person to say something very important about how he lived this life. And it is clear that at the turn of the 4th and 3rd millennia BC, along with the birth of the Egyptian statehood, along with the emergence of the Egyptian literature, there are separate, very bright authors who find their own secret word about how to call oneself in the next path of the truth. Then similar inscriptions appear in one, in the second, in the third tomb. Some text was liked, it began to be copied. And so for every great epoch of the existence of ancient Egypt, a specific canon of this very inscription appears at the entrance to the tomb. In fact, a business card of the person whose posthumous dwelling you come to, in which he tries to say that he followed the truth on his path. Literally, right at the foot of the Pyramid of Khufu, there is such a wonderful tomb. The head of the necropolis of Giza was very important. His name was Vashemnefertiti. It was the 25th century BC, at the time when he was the ruler of the great necropolis. The pyramid was about 100 years old. I came out of my city. I came out of my region. I am resting in this tomb, saying the truth by God's will every day, for this is good. I was a speaking king about how people serve. I have never said anything bad against people. The majesty of my ruler. Vashemnefer literally in Toret, another nobleman of that time, his name was Urho. He was also buried here in Giza. I come out of my city, I come down from my region, I say the truth there, and I do the truth there. I have never done anything bad to people. I have never made people spend the night in anger because of me. Since I was born, look how interesting it is. On the one hand, a canon appears. I come out of my city. I come out of my province. Where does this person go? It's a tomb. He goes to the world of gods and ancestors. And here, on this threshold, we enter the tomb, as the guests mentioned. But the complex is an exit for him. He goes where there will be a burial court, where he hopes to meet the ancestors and the gods, and then he begins to say what is most important to him. And here, in the second text, a very important phrase for the Egyptians appears. He spoke the truth, he did the truth, to listen, to speak, to understand, but at the same time to do. What has been heard must be done. This is a very important rule for the confirmation of the truth for the ancient Egyptians. A little south of Giza, the necropolis of Saqqara, another appeal to the living. I will create this tomb according to the law, says the Jewish Tepkerakti. I have never appropriated someone else's property. All who worked creating it, they worked hard, praising God for me. I have never done anything against anyone. As God loves the righteous thing, so I am revered before my Lord. Kagimne Saqqara, I was appreciated and praised by His Majesty. O you living, do what is true for the King, for the truth is what is loved by God. Say what is true to the King, for the King loves the truth. O you living, do not speak ill of me to the King in anger, for the Lord knows my character and my affairs. The King relies on me more than on any nobleman. I was the one who speaks the truth. I answered rightly as the King loves it. And so I will prosper with the King. I will prosper with the great God. The next step, yes, he speaks the truth before the King, and the great God appears, in this case, Osiris, the God who will judge him in the afterlife. In some tombs, which are known not only for their texts, but also for their striking monuments, for example, in Saqqara, the tomb of Neferseshimta, the great-grandson of a judge, a man who was in fact a prime minister, or, as we traditionally say in Egyptology, a vizier in the era of Tsar Teti's reign. in the 24th century BC. He doesn't just speak the truth at the entrance. He appears before us in his eternal form. This is a false door, a gate for his essence, through which he passes to see if he is revered. Is there a victim on the altar of the victim? And what is very important for the ancient Egyptians, do they remember and pronounce his name? For the one who pronounces his name will live forever. Two of his statues flank this magical passage, and from above, from this niche, from this window, he looks at us from another world, wishing to see those who come here to his tomb to honour his memory. We remember that throughout the history of ancient Egypt, despite the absolutely different forms of tombs, the tombs always had two components. The first is the burial chamber, what was inaccessible, where the mummy was, if it was not disturbed by the robbers. But next to the burial chamber, there was always a chapel, a sanctuary where one could come, take beer, wine, bread or water, bring the victim to honour the memory of this person. Even if you did not have anything, you could pronounce the sacrificial formula of well-being by pronouncing his name. That is why each false door in the centre of such an opening and above this opening has a raised price tag. This entrance and exit are actually open for the dead entities. Ancient Egyptians called the entity that would remain in the tomb Ka. We translate this word as a vital force, as a double. Ka is the vital force that comes to the father from the grandfather and to the son from the father. It manifests itself in every next generation of the family. If it is strong, if there are many offspring, it means that it is a very righteous and strong family. And if it is a righteous and strong family, then it is those people who supported Maat with their actions. So Nefers and Shemta, I left my city, I came down from my province, I buried the one who got stuck by the shore, I buried the one who had no son, I made a boat for the one who had no boat, I supported the orphans. And then there was a whole tradition of this canon in which a person leaving our life to eternal life, not to death, but to eternal life, he, in this short formula, apart from telling about his life, his biography, his beloved wives, children, and everything that surrounded him, this is depicted on the walls of tombs. So in this canon, the rule of a person in whom he puts the truth above all else is developed. And then he begins to describe what this truth consists of. From the fact that the judge is just, from the fact that the person is kind, from the fact that he was buried by his own hands, the one who had no son, or he found a boat for the one who had no boat. Ancient Egypt is very specific, and against the background of high, great divine ideas. For them, the truth of heaven is always expressed in small things, those that accompany a person at every step of his life, to whom he helped, to whom he supported, to whom he saved. The value of these so-called small deeds is no less than the great divine gifts with which the king approaches the world of gods. Finally, among these first witnesses from the third millennium to the new era, there are special witnesses. These are people who are thinkers, who are wise, who are those people whose names were praised throughout many generations. And so gradually a whole genre of literature whose name is translated into the Russian language as a very incorrect word, education. This education, some kind of forced education of someone. In the original, it is called Sebaid. Sebaid is what opens the heavenly doors. It is wisdom. And probably it is the right of all Europeans who publish these texts, the French, because this category of text is called sagesse, wisdom. I'm not talking about it by chance. looking at the interior of the tomb of a great man called Takateb at the end of the 25th century to the new era. Think about the date that I pronounce, the middle of the 3rd millennium to the new era. Takateb was the king's son. He was a judge, he was a thinker, and he was the one whose ancient Egyptian texts are called Chati. Chati is a vizier, a prime minister, and this man left a fantastic text of his reflection. He got old, he realised that he knew something, he realised that he had a special feeling for the world of gods. He realised that he could say something to the generation of the future world. And in this text, he asked the king, at the end of his career, it was Jethkar of Sesi, he asked the king of Sesi to allow him to leave his thoughts forever. This is a very interesting story because we are used to freedom of choice, and we want to, when we publish some notes, memoirs, we are very free in the freedom of speech. And in ancient Egypt, the king gave permission, because any freedom of speech to write a text or to order your own statue for the temple is something that should be associated with Ma'at, because Ma'at is also systematization. It is conforming to the rules and laws of the world in which the ancient Egyptian lives. And the text that Ptah Kateb depicted here in front of the altar of sacrifice, he touches with his right hand the vertically depicted long narrow breads as a sign that food has been brought to him. And what he brings to his face is a vessel with holy oil. This is not accidental, because for the ancient Egyptians, as many of you know, life is transmitted by air, Chayu Anang, the breath of eternal life. If you hold a vessel with holy oil, what do? You inhale the scent, and since you inhale the scent, you breathe. And since you are depicted as breathing, you are depicted as alive. Because it's not just Ptah Kateb, it is Ka, his life force, and what remains in the tomb. And here is a rich sacrifice, many bows on the altar of sacrifice for his entity on the right. And in the centre, there is also a huge false door that should connect the world of the living and the dead. What Takateb left under the permission of Zarjidka was perceived by the ancient Egyptian civilization as a great thing, and this great thing was copied many times. Moreover, when the boy received his first hip bandage at the age of 6, he came to school, where he taught not grammar nor alphabets, but the text of wisdom written by someone from his ancestors. And then, at first, this text was read, then learned, and then, on the basis of such texts, the grammar of the ancient Egyptian language was formed. And it seems that a person came to learn the language in order to become a priest. But from an early age, education was built on these great didactic works. Throughout the existence of the ancient Egyptian civilization, Egypt glorified Ptah Kateb and Jedef Korah, Kagemni and Kahikara Seneba, and many, many other people, those great teachers who left their thoughts about what Ma'at is. We will return to Ptah Kateb today. At the very end, I will read to you a translation of his wisdom made for today. We will listen to a man from the middle of the 3rd millennium BC, and while we continue our journey through the tombs, because what was laid down in the era of the pyramids, what was made by these people whom we will talk about now, was not only copied by the next generations of Egyptians, but on the contrary, each next era, each next generation brought something new, its own feeling of truth. From the tombs of Wilmozaheti, Sauti, Middle Egypt, I came out of my city, I came down from my province, doing what people love and what gods glorify. I gave bread to the hungry, I gave clothes to the naked, I listened to the widows crying, and I gave a house to the orphan. I turned my back to the lying lover, and I did not judge the innocent because of his words. I answered with good, but with evil. I did not seek evil in order to get it better on earth and then to gain reverence. This reverence, according to the ancient Egyptian Ima, is a state of a human being. We remember that Egyptians had a very difficult understanding of a human being. There are 9 components of a human being. Yes, we can very conventionally talk about a body or a soul, but Ima is a human whose essence comes from the afterlife, and Osiris himself puts on the steps of his throne before God the Great. Ima before God the Great is a person with a pure heart, a person with a pure speech, a person with pure deeds. This is what we are going to talk about today. Naturally, since ancient times, despite the fact that Ma'at as a goddess seems to us to be an abstract, an extraordinary, great truth, she had temples and she had a priesthood. Most often temples of the goddess Ma'at were located in the complex of the royal palace because it was directly connected logically with the state administration. Nevertheless, despite the fact that the Egyptian palaces practically did not reach our time due to the fact that this luxury was disassembled almost immediately in the next epoch between the Usabites and the wars, we have a lot of monuments depicting the people who served the truth, who were directly priests of the goddess Ma'at. The stela of one of such noblemen of the 24th century, Louvre de Paris, is depicted here with his wife. Again, the sacrifice, again it is written how many thousands of bread, beer, wine, water, cattle, clothes, incense should be given to the essence of his world every other day. But in addition to this, among his texts there are his titles that depict the place that the priest of the goddess Ma'at, his name was Mentuhatep, so the titles: to the truly represented king of the mouth of the city of Nihin. This is the supreme judge, the priest Hemneker, the goddess Ma'at. I will explain the title now. The chief of the secret topics that should be heard in the palace alone. Oh, what a fanciful title. The state chief Ajmer, the Samaritan, the only friend. Let's analyse the titles. What is Ajmer? Ajmer is a very systematic ruler who, for example, appoints a king for a huge construction. Ajmer performs all the necessary actions for a large expedition to go for stones in the desert or for half-precious stones. Ajmer is the tax system of a large nobleman's household that belongs to the king or to the temple or to some high-ranking chief. The priest Hemneker, the goddess Ma'at. Imagine that in the Egyptian representation, in the Egyptian worldview, there's a completely special understanding of who the priest of God is. And if we climb into the old Soviet epistemological studies, with all due respect to the Russian and Soviet Egyptology of the 20th century, this title, Hemneker, is translated everywhere as a slave of God. It's not about that. There's no word slave. Imagine that we are ancient Egyptians. If we are all taken together, we are all Hemu, the spiritual body of our king. And all priests are Hemu. They are the flesh of their God. And that's why God manifests through his priests, that they are dedicated to him, have a special connection with him, physical, magical, spiritual, whatever. Hemneker is literally a part of this community of flesh of his God or his goddess. So is it about slaves? Of course not. It's about a completely different, very deep and complex concept. This one example, there are hundreds of thousands of them. I don't want to overload you with them. It shows who was a priest of the goddess of hell, who was a priest of the truth, a man who was a Samaritan, a personal friend of the king, the only friend of the king, who knew the court secrets, who was a major manager, and yet so modestly depicted on the monument of the 21st, 20th centuries before the new era, he stands before the eternity of his late altar in the 24th century before the new era, here under the foundation of the Great Pyramid of Tsar Unas, the text of the pyramids. Yes, this is the era when there will be no great pyramids of Giza, and here in Saqqara, relatively small pyramids will be built. But on the walls of their inner rooms, hieroglyphic texts will be written, which in total represent the oldest religious text in the history of mankind. These are the great texts of the pyramids. And if the external time, unfortunately, is omnipresent, the pyramid has long lost its real form. And once there was a temple next to it, then we go down under the pyramid of Unas. By the way, do you know when you go down? Well, first of all, 3 people died because the size of this passage is oriented towards the sarcophagus, and they had to lower it into the dungeon by the side ramps. The first feeling is very vivid, very memorable, when from this dazzling light of Egypt, with its incredible sun, suddenly there is darkness, and only then, in the darkness, your vision adapts. You begin to look at some stones, and you go down, and suddenly, on these first galleries and passages, hieroglyphs appear on the walls, carved in the walls, which were captured by the great wisdom. But this is for us. And if we remember that for most of the pyramids, the entrance to the north is for us, because the king must gather his essence, understand the eternity of the existence of his soul. And this is also Ma'at, to realize one's immortality. This is Ma'at, this is right. And then he gathers himself together and he goes out, and in exchange for this black space, this kind of naturalness inside his pyramid, he finds himself in the light of day. And then all these quiet texts that talk about the exit from the light of day, they actually talk about this. The burial chamber of the Pyramid of Unas on the walls behind the sarcophagus is an image of a heavenly palace. On the ceiling there are stars. This is the starry sky, and there are a huge number of texts around it. We know more than 650 of the sermons, and they all talk about the king's immortality, about the late ritual that was supposed to provide the king with eternal life. They say that as if up the stairs of his pyramid, the king rises to the sky, and the gods in horror look at his might, because he is able to overcome death as they once overcame death. The text talks about how he gathers parts of his body, he gathers his hands, legs, he takes his head, and he rises up through the heavenly spheres, and the spheres are shaking, and the spirits look in horror at the birth of a new deity that has passed the earthly path. Here, in the text of the pyramids, the goddess Ma'at appears several times in very important contexts, and the understanding of the truth is now for the king, not for the courtier, but for the king. We remember that the ancient Egyptians divided all beings into 4 categories. These are Necheru, the gods, Ahu, the blessed ancestors, Remek, and a significant part of the Pads of people, and Nesu, the kings. That is, kings after the coronation are creatures of a slightly different nature than ordinary people, but they also need to find the truth. You will shine like hell, trampling lies. You will make Ma'at stand behind you. Remember this phrase, it will soon be useful to us. Trampling lies. The following parable. The gods, the keepers of the sides of the world, the great masters of embalming, Inseti, Hapi, Duamutef, and Kebesenu, the protectors of the canopies, the vessels in which the innards are placed after embalming, and they meet the king. For Pepe, one of these gods in Seti, Hepi, Duamutef and Kibesenu, they live by the truth, they feed on the truth, they shine by the truth, they lean on their staffs looking for the upper Egypt. This king, Unis, he came out of the fiery island, he made the truth in the place of lies. Where does Unis come? Creating the truth. He brings the truth with him. Heaven is in peace, the earth is in pleasure, and the heart, when they hear about the king who placed the truth in the place of lies, he will bring it with him. Eunice, tell the good name of the king of this god. Greetings to you. Greetings to your essence. Greetings to your kin. You are justified. O King Eunice, you are justified to this king before God. There can be a lot of examples, but the main ones are already here. To establish the truth and to correct the lies. In the Egyptian world, everything is binary. This incredible duality is the basis of their culture. And like there's math, there is its opposite side, Esaphet. It is easier for us to translate the word lie because it is clear to everyone. But if you try to find out what Esaphet from the Egyptian texts, you will get a very interesting result. After all, a lie is something deliberately distorted. But what is Safet is a story that has not been finished. It is meanness that is given for a good deed. It is a story that is told in order to get some benefit from a person. It is something very close to the old Slavic word krivda. It is a deliberately distorted truth. On the one hand, it is very interesting. There is truth, there is krivda, and the truth needs to be constantly updated, established, created, brought, because the truth comes where it was brought. And krivda crawls by itself. And if you do not assert the truth, krivda, like mold, takes up space. Therefore, the struggle with krivda, with this lie, with this chaos is very important. But if you finally destroy all krivda and Ma'at triumphs, the world will stop. Because the movement of life in the world is always between two poles. And Ma'at and Esaphet, which we will also remember many times today, are the two poles of such existence. It is also said that such one-root words associated with the root Ma'at, with the root of righteousness, are truly correct. To direct, just like in Russian, to create, to act in a proper way. Esaphet is not only krivda, it has another definition of the Egyptian texts. Gireg. Gireg is incorrect. It is erroneous. What was done by mistake, but not on purpose. But it happened. But it was not corrected. This is Gireg, and the difference between Esaphet and Gireg is also quite large. To create the truth is good for man, good for the king, good for God. God loves the truth. Therefore, in most of these biographies, tiny examples of which I have read to you, there is on the one hand a phrase that says that the truth is desirable for God, and on the other hand, man, during his lifetime, is offered to raise the truth to the ruler of the truth, that is to God, to the height of heaven. In addition, Esaphet stops and Ma'at begins to conquer at least some space in its alter ego when a very important thing happens. Ancient Egyptians call it the verb uhum. Uhem is to repeat. When you go through life, maybe you are a very young person, you don't have any moral orientations yet, but if you repeat what your ancestors bequeathed to you, this uhum, as a repetition of such a mantra, is what also helps the truth to triumph and what helps the world not to collapse. Because if you don't support the Ma'at, and if Esaphet triumphs, the opposite end of the world will occur. Everything will stop. The gods will return to their original state, and the noon will come. The great chaos, the great father of the gods, and yes, a new universal cycle will be created from it again. Nothing dies, everything transforms, but the chance of experience and time will be lost. This is how the name of the goddess Maat in the ancient Egyptian language, the 14th century BC, and in the tomb of the king, the chief of the king's property, Heruf, there are several hieroglyphs that make up the sound components of the name Maat. By the way, we all remember that the Egyptian language is dead. They didn't write out the vowels, but the consonants and the half consonants, and what we pronounce as mat, we pronounce two letters A. It's not like that. The first A is short and the second is long and deaf. If we take some similar examples from Arabic and other languages, we'll get something like Mayat. It's a completely different word with two completely different A's that are written here. And finally, here she is, our beauty, which we will discuss in detail today. She is depicted here in the form of an embalmed figure, because it is a text from the tomb, but she sits all covered with such an embroidered cover. She has a long, archaic woman's wig, which we know from the Egyptian images from the deepest antiquity. On her head, her main symbol is an embroidered feather, as light as air, which flies in space. This is the main symbol of the goddess Maat, and in her hands she holds the symbol of the eternal life of Ankh, because life is inseparable from Maat. These are two inseparable terms for an ancient Egyptian. Maat is omnipresent. Omnipresent, it can manifest itself instantly in many places. That is why she is often depicted with a winged figure. This is a great shot, a descent into the burial chamber of the tomb of Queen Nefertari, loved by Jumeirah II. And for Nefertari, the chamber where her sarcophagus, it will become a hall where the gods will judge her on the subject of the righteousness of her soul. That is why the sign that she is righteous so incredibly spreads her wings, the great daughter of the sun. By the way, her sunny nature is very often emphasized. This is her main title. And if you look closely at the beginning of the inscription that is above the goddess, the inscription goes from right to left. First, a group of signs that say that some words, then the goddess's name, which you already imagine, ends with her figure, and then a goose, bread, and the sun. A goose and bread. A garden is a daughter. The sun is a daughter of the sun. And then, respectively, the rest of her necessary functions in relation to Nefertari. Wings in ancient Egypt are flight, omnipresent force, ability to move, and protection. Always protection. And that is why we will see many times that Mot is an incredibly merciful goddess, although it is related to the court. And the righteous souls of the deceased, the names of the righteous deceased, for us the deceased, for them the eternal living, in terms of the Egyptian tradition, Mot often ends with her wings. We will see this a lot. Mot is one of those goddesses who's always present on the sunny boat. Here is one of the late papyruses from the 10th century BC, which is kept in Warsaw. This is the sunrise, and a large figure of a monkey, a baboon, represents the so-called soul of the East. As you remember, recently we talked about the sun, that jackals of the soul of the West see the sun at sunset, and at sunrise little baboons, pavians, greet the rising sun, howl, clap their hands, stretch their palms to the sun. This is a prayer pose, an Egyptian prayer pose, an adoration. And there, behind the great Mana, the great mountain of the east, the sunny Manijit rises, the great boat of millions of years. And here they stand on its nose, even before the sun itself. You can see two goddesses at dawn. The one in the green dress closer to us is Kadhor, the great goddess of mother, the great goddess of love. Behind her is Ma'at, and a feather on her head You can see it well. For ancient Egyptians, Ma'at and Kadhor are a combination of two mothers. These are the main manifestations of the divine feminine principle that carries life within itself. Kadhor, the goddess of heaven, the goddess of love, the goddess of mother. She constantly gives birth to the sun. They also say that the sun is a calf that appeared between the legs of the cow, the great goddess of heaven. But if Kadhor gives birth, renews, conquers death, launches the cycle, then Ma'at calculates how it should be. That is, in Kadhor, the function of victory over death is the function of eternal life. And in Ma'at, it is a clear canon, for everything has its time. This is a very important function of the goddess Ma'at. She is the great goddess of ritual, because in ritual she calculates what gifts are suitable for the gods when the summer should come, when the first hour of the night begins, and when it's time for a person to think about eternal life. And this full rhythm is also included in the goddess Ma'at. That is why she is often depicted on a sunbed. Another very beautiful example is a relief painted from the ceiling of the temple of the god Khnum Visne, a late but beautiful temple of the 4th century of the New Era. Here to its pier along the heavenly waters, the huge sunbed of the sun god is located. On the nose, on the pedestal, there is a desert wolf with his paws raised up. This is Upuat, the god who opens all the ways. Behind him is Ma'at, followed by Kadhor, then Thoth, the headless great ruler of wisdom, time, cycles and magic, followed by the goddess Asida. Accordingly, the gods Thoth and Amun-Min, who greet the Lord here, bring him a great divine eye as a sign that everything is well, that death is over, that life is triumphant, that everything corresponds to the original order. The ancient Egyptian who dreams of returning forever, of seeing the sun on the eastern horizon, many times glorifies the goddess Ma'at as a companion of the sun god. Here is a fragment of a very beautiful text from the 14th century BC, from the tomb of the great singer god of Ammon, Neferhotep. Hurrah! What comes into the world from Ma'at? Ma'at has reunited with his forehead. Hurrah! Rising together with Ma'at, Ma'at embraces his beauty. Hurrah! Hurrah! Active through Ma'at. Ma'at is always in his possession. Hurrah! Powerful through Ma'at. He lives for her every day. Hurrah! The one who created Ma'at, the one to whom Ma'at is brought. You have placed Ma'at in your heart so that I may take her for your Ka, for the life and strength of yours. I know you live for her. You have created her body. I am righteous. I am free from lies. I am the one who is never deceived. O gods, masters of both Ma'at, yes, accept the singer god of Ammon, Neferhotep with his right voice in the world and in the world. The text is not only very beautiful, there are several very important points here. Firstly, hurrah! Powerful through Ma'at, through his daughter. Yes, that's right. According to the legend, when the creation of the world begins, in the early days, the first home of Sushi appears from the pre-eternal ocean of the house Nuna, on which the sun, or rather the pre-eternal deity in the form of the sun, begins to create the world. The sun can create the world only from the moment when it rises to the top of this hill, Ben Ma'at. It can create just as the goddess of heaven, but Ma'at determines the order of creation. The ceremony of creation, the ritual of creation, is completely a recipe. The recipe, as it is completely unexpected, is also Ma'at. The right recipe is the key to success, as we all know, and this is also Ma'at. Secondly, the action through Ma'at. Now you understand it. Yes, he created the body. Ma'at, the sun god. but he lives by it. And then many were probably interested in the phrase, the gods are the masters of both Ma'at. And we come to one very important thing. Initially, when there was the golden age, when gods coexisted and lived with people, there was only Ma'at. And then, when people rebelled against the gods, when they insulted the gods, and the gods left the heavenly spheres, leaving people, their beloved creatures, here on this earth, then Ma'at is divided. And two sisters appear with the same face, Ma'ati. In Egypt there is a dual number, one plural, and there is a dual, and one Ma'at is earthly, and the other Ma'at is heavenly. And then here on earth, let's hope that at least something follows this great earthly truth. There in heaven, in the heavenly world, everything exists according to the rules of the great heavenly Ma'at. And when a person prays to God with a request, the request is heard only in this case if the earthly Ma'at, in which his heart coincides with the heavenly Ma'at, then the great passage of heaven opens and the prayer will be heard. Or, on the contrary, the essence of the deity, the spirit, the ancestor, will come back to earth due to the fact that the earthly Ma'at united with the heavenly Ma'at, and two sisters became one goddess. This is the main secret of opening the gates of prayer, worship, and any other ritual that is associated with what the ancient Egyptians called the prayer of the heart. In the images associated with the Egyptian understanding of the universe, the Ma'at will always be depicted. Here is the papyrus that was made for the Jewessness of Pakishutia, the 10th century BC, a huge nude goddess leaning over the earth, and her husband Geb leaning on her elbow, the god of the earth. And this is the space between them. The sun is floating in this space, the great slave of Elodie for millions of years. And if you look closely, in addition to the sun disk on his head, protected by the Urim, the great ruler of life, he has an ostrich feather in his hands. This is another very important principle close to the Ma'at, because all the space between the earth and the sky is filled with air. We breathe air. This is what we live by. This is the god Shu, the god of air in the Egyptian tradition, and according to one version, the husband of the goddess Ma'at. Ma'at as a law, as the basis of the world, as the rule thanks to which the world exists, of course, is present here. Here she sits on the sun god's lap, and she has the Ankh of life in her hand, because she is the basis of everything that exists. Ma'at is very important for the sun. Remember, when I read the text of the pyramid, I asked you to remember, Ma'at stands behind my back. According to the tradition, Ma'at always stands behind the sun god, behind her father, and helps him rule the universe. On the right is a fragment of a painted relief from the tomb of Tausert, who was a pharaoh woman in the 12th century BC. Here is a large parade image of the figure of Ra-Harati, the sun god, and behind him, raising his hand in prayer in a pose of reverence to his father, there's a great sun daughter. Here she is Ma'at, the daughter of the sun, the lady of the sky, the ruler of all gods. This is the inscription that frames the feather on both sides, which is held by ribbons and is held on her wig. If Ma'at is present with the sun during the day journey from the east to the west, she is also present during the night journey. This is the tomb of the priest of the 13th century BC, a small pyramid, and there is the sun in the night form. This is Euphrates, the night sun, with the head of Ovna, and next to it, in Lodz, you can see the same Ma'at with her sign of eternal life on the pedestal. And on the lunar Lodz, there's also Ma'at, otherwise there would be no great lunar cycle. The lunar cycle is very important for the gods, because the moon is Osiris, the eternal rebirth. On the other hand, the Egyptian texts beautifully state that the goddess looks at the lunar mirrors, because this is the shortest cycle of renewal. When the goddess looks at the lunar mirror, she gets the eternal youth of her face. The relief of the tomb of the king of the 1st century BC, the 13th century BC, the large lunar lauds. The Egyptians depicted the moon in the form of a disc and a serpent, which are combined together, and next to it the god keeper holds a huge feather of the goddess Maat, and there's the name of the goddess, Mahat. The truth is signed so that the moon coexists with the sun in the correct rhythm and in the correct forms. In the Egyptian religion, there was a notion that the great truth of heaven is used to properly structure our world, the world of the living, the world of matter. This story is connected with the god Ptah, whose name is translated as the one who creates the form. And this wonderful statue of the god Ptah from the tomb of Tutankhamun is a great masterpiece. I think everyone remembers it. The amazing beauty of the figure of Ptah himself, which is covered with feathers in the form of wings of the great goddesses. His whole body is covered with feathers. He has a scythe in his hands that combines the symbols of life and immutability. And on his head there is a faience cap that actually repeats the shape of a shepherd that was worn in ancient Egypt by jewelers, craftsmen, metallurgists. Because Ptah, according to the legend, is not just one of the forms of the creator god, but he is the god who already knows that the world of the earth and the world of heaven are divided. This sad division, as his texts call it. He begins to invent intricate components and materials in order to make such statues of gods that they will agree to come to. The gods do not come to everybody. The goddess Mahat is not present in the northern capitals of Egypt. It is Ptah who invents these symbolic combinations of materials, metals, stones, according to which the statues of gods are made, into which the souls of the gods enter during the service. Let's look carefully at this wonderful monument and look at the shape of the pedestal on which Ptah stands. Because if you look at it from the side, you will see the hieroglyph of the goddess Mat. And one of the titles of Ptah is Heteb Hermat, peaceful on truth. Heteb means to be peaceful, to be full, to be happy, to be healing, to be calm, and to be ready for anything. There are a lot of Egyptian terms that have no direct translation into the European language at all, and only by going through all these possible connotations you can get to the point. After all, if Ptah is a great materialist, the creator of temples, the creator of the bodies of gods, the creator of the canon of architecture, the creator of the canon of what symbolic load a certain material has, he must be guided by something. And his guidance is Mat, because he does everything as it should be in truth. Therefore, very often Ptah will be depicted on such a pedestal that his feet will rest on the truth, or Mat will become his protector and patroness. Amazing beauty. A painted relief next to it, also from the tomb of Taucer in the Valley of Kings, I remind you, 12th century BC, an open gate of the sanctuary. From this little golden naos, the reliquary in which the statue of the deity resides, the doors are open. Ptah stands in the centre, and look at the beauty. The winged mat embraces him inside. And again, pay attention to the fact that life is in her hand. Life is the basis of life, the rule of life, the system of life, the canon of life. This life will be repeated in texts and images that will be associated with the goddess Maat in many examples of Egyptian art. Another example is the statue of the god Ptah, a large monument made of black granite. In the image of the god Ptah, Tsar Amenhotep III was depicted, I remind you, the St. Petersburg Sphinx, 14th century BC. Here is Ptah himself with the king's face. The sign of eternal life is squeezed in his hands several times. The traditional staff of Ptah is in his hands, and again we look at the pedestal. He stands again with his feet, he rests on the wall. Maat must triumph. Ptah has two forms. There's the one you saw. He's a huge god, the universal god, in the form of Demiurge, the great lord of Memphis, the husband of Sekhmet, and the father of Nefertum. And there is his small form, Ptah. Who is Ptah? Ptah is the small form of the god protector. He is the genius who keeps you. He is a genius who knows how to find treasures. He is a genius who's connected with the secret treasures of the earth. According to the legend, when Nesaniah from the temple of Sir Abd el-Kadim is a great Kadkor of Lady Biruza, she steps on the ground under the feet of Biruza, and Meti Malakit run lizards, and small dwarfs carry golden dishes filled with all the treasures hidden inside the mountain. Yes, it is clear. When I tell this story, the audience always smiles because the owner of the Copper Mountain is absolutely the same type. But we are talking about these incredible dwarfs who are connected with the fact that they live in our world and in the other world. A wonderful amulet in the form of Ptah. Let's see what happens here. First of all, he kicks crocodiles with his feet, because crocodiles are the forces of chaos in this case. The great goddesses form a protective guard around him. Sometimes there are more goddesses. They stand with their backs to what they are protecting and start dancing around him in the sun. And here on the left is the goddess Neftida, on the right is the goddess Isidah, and when we turn the statue from the back, there is such a gorgeous amulet, winged, with a feather on its head, and even a sun disk on its head. And here they protect the forms of the manifestations of other gods, taking into account that the manifested deity is male, and it is protected by the female deity. This is a very important function of protection that all goddesses have, and it is also very important for the Maat. In addition to being the daughter of the sun, let's look at one of the most beautiful images of the goddess. And this is a block that was cut out, unfortunately, from the pillar of the tomb of Tsar Setia in the 13th century BC and transported to Florence. Florence is an archaeological museum and the main monument and symbol of this entire museum collection. Everything here is beautiful, including the wide necklace of the Use, which symbolises the Nile waters during the sun's outflow, and a very beautiful dress and bracelets, and an ancient wig, such as they wore from the 4th millennium BC, and her feather. She is not just a Maat here, she is a Maat, the daughter of the sun, and she is a lady who resides above the Ugare. The Ugare is the space of the necropolis. It is a space that is partly in our cemetery and partly in another world. It is the great ruler of the transition. It is the guardian of those who go from the world of the living to the world of the eternally alive, as the ancient Egyptians thought. And since, as we already understand, it is a ritual, it is logic, it is a rule, and it is a law. In the Egyptian culture, she often appears as the wife of Thoth. Thoth is the Greek form of the name of this god. In ancient Egyptian, it seems Jehuti. Thoth is the god of the moon and magic, wisdom and word. It is a deity that, for the god of the sun, invents Meduneker, a divine letter that is the ancient Egyptian language. And this complexity and combination of Thoth and Ma'at is very common in the Egyptian culture. What you see now on the right from the collection of the Metropolitan Museum in New York is the incrustation of a large wooden naos, that is a box for the statue of the deity. And here on the divine banner stands Ibis, the sacred bird of Thoth, and next to it is the ostrich feather. Ibis is Thoth, and accordingly the ostrich feather as the main symbol of the goddess Ma'at. And here one very interesting thing appears. The fact is that many areas of a person's life are connected with accuracy, with the fact that it is necessary to follow the rules. And all the wives of the god Thoth are kind of subordinated. They identify with Ma'at. Well, first, a very beautiful monument, a rare one by the way. This is the Kuzner Gone Over Museum. This is a sarcophagus for the mummy of the sacred Ibis, the foreteller, an oracle board that was famous for giving oracles. Ibis's body is made of legs and a bronze head, and the body itself is a wooden gold-plated box. Where you see the bronze feathers in the back, there is a lid, a bronze insert opens, and the mummy of the sacred Ibis. This is a reliquary, and here is such a luxurious Amat. She is a royal here with a sacred snake on her forehead. She is present next to her husband. Why is Ma'at so important to Thoth? Well, let's look at other of his spouses who are actually other faces of Ma'at, or sisters, or other figures, or faces. That is, it seems that in different wives of Thoth, Ma'at is not just manifested but associated with some additional functions. In the centre there is a wonderful monument from the 6th century BC from the Metropolitan Museum, Nemetewi, the elder wife of Thoth, the great ruler of the temple, as a successfully functioning organism. What do I mean? The temple is a wonderful place to communicate with God. The temple is an economic unit. Sorry, the hostess should be fine. The temple is a sanctuary of sacred knowledge, of education, of schools, of institutes, of religious tradition. If everything is fine, it is Nemetewi, one of the faces of Ma'at. On the other hand, the goddess that many of you know is Seshat, the patroness of mathematics, architecture, and temple annals. It is she who records the order of the names of the Egyptian kings on the great heraldic tree Eshed. Mathematics, architecture, annals, rules. Rules, accuracy, calculation. This is also related to Ma'at. Therefore, Seshat, as one of her incarnations, is always depicted with a very beautiful outfit with a 7-pointed star. We do not know what it is. There is no commentator of this text. But she is also a great priestess, so she is wearing a priestly outfit, a leopard school with stars. She's holding a kalam, a stick for writing, and on the unopened leaf of the phoenix palm, she's writing what is unfolded next to it, the new name of the new ruler, Tsar Ramses II. This very plant on which she is writing, the unopened leaf of the phoenix palm, is the hieroglyph of Renapet, the new year. She is opening the new year by writing the full title of this ruler. Nemetewi, Seshat, and Ma'at are the necessary companions of the god Thoth. Thoth is the letter, the moon, the magic, the account, and time. Time is understood here as a cycle, as the correctness of moving and the constant repetition of life in this cycle. That is why Ma'at is very much needed here. And again we are in the tomb of Queen Nefertari, the beloved wife of Ramses II. Here we see a fragment of an illustration of a parable from the text we know as the Book of the Dead, which in ancient times was called the parable of the sunrise. Nefertari stands before the god Thoth, before the wisdom and the letter. And next to her is a large pot for water. Above this pot is a palette for the letter with red and black paint. And on this pot with water in the centre, next to the palette, sits a little frog. The frog is Heket, the goddess of birth and rebirth. She is known for her fertility. And here in this text, Nefertari addresses Thoth and says that in order to overcome death, to gain eternal life, she needs to learn the Medunenture. After learning the Medunenture, she will be able to read the texts of the sacred knowledge. They will become a support and reinforcement for her soul. And in order to assure Thoth that the sacred knowledge and the letter she receives from him will be used in practice, she says a wonderful thing here. Following the truth, I will comprehend the truth. On the one hand, this double truth as teaching and practice, listening and doing, and on the other hand, following one truth, you will comprehend another heavenly truth. And there is no truth and good without deeds. You can't just rejoice in the truth, listen to the truth, and so on. In ancient Egypt, this action is in accordance with the truth. We will talk about this in detail later today. And Maat as a defender, the same Nefertari, a fragment of the painted reliefs on the wall of the staircase that goes from the upper level of the tomb to the burial chamber. Nefertari, her pink hand under a vessel for wine, stands before the goddesses. Here is Hathor, the great mother. In the middle is Selket, a goddess associated with breathing, healing, medicine, and protection. And in the end, here is this magnificent kneeling mite with such turquoise, malachite wings. And she stands here as the great defender of the name of the Queen. For the ancient Egyptians, we are holy to our name that we have been given, especially if we are talking about the name in secret, because through the secret name, the gods interact with us. And here, between the wings of Maat, first of all, in the oval with a yellow filling, is the name of the Queen, Nefertari. Nefertari, the beloved goddess Mut. And then, literally at once attached to this oval, is the great sign of infinity, the symbol of the orbit in which the sun rotates, the symbol of a rope that has no end. This is the time of infinity in which our world lives. And accordingly, here, inside the wings of the goddess Maat, there is a certain space of protection for Nefertari, who will live infinitely. And what about Isafet? How much is she in ancient Egypt beyond the law? The fact is that many of us, people raised in modern Western culture, we are very used to black and white, and it spoils our mind. From the point of view of ancient Egyptians, there is no black, no white, no good, no bad. It all depends on the context. And when we think about Isafet and begin to look for this concept of Egyptian texts, we remember the story that every night the sun goes down to the other world to fight the great Apop, the snake of chaos. On the one hand, the snake will be defeated and the sun will pass to the eastern horizon of our sky. On the other hand, the merciful goddess Selket, which we have just seen on the wall of Nefertari's tomb, will take the body of Apop, cut into pieces, take a needle and thread and sew the snake together. Because if the snake remains cut and dies, the movement of the universe will stop. The sun will be driven away by the snake forever. The sun will be defeated by the snake forever. This movement of life between two poles is what ancient Egypt is built on. And here I show this illustration from the remarkable papyrus of the great Jew Reuben of the 11th to 10th centuries BC, not by chance. I'm interested not only in the great Seth who beats Apop and Ansam to get his spear. He's not just like the god of the desert, the enemy of Osiris, but he's like the carrier of the highest military manpower. He's able to defeat Apop at this hour of the night. The thing is that Apop, the ruler of Asafet, is the chief of all those who oppose Mahat. But If Apop is defeated, and if Isaphet is finally defeated, the world will collapse. That's why Egypt says that according to one version, the great goddess Neith, the great mother-in-law who creates the sun, spits it into the abyss, realizing that the son she gave birth to as her beloved child is the ultimate being. And there's another version that Apop is the mother-in-law of the sun god who Neith cut off and threw away into the great space of chaos. And she transformed into the great Apop, who's still the blood brother of the sun god. There can't be Apop without Ra, like Ra without Apop. There can't be Mahat without Isaphet, just like Isaphet can't be without Mahat. This is a remarkable monument of the Royal Museum of Antiquity in Leiden. It's a 13th century stela of the great ocean. The main images, why are they brown? They were covered with glue and gilded, and there's some gold left. The Seth on the left in human form is about to pierce the spear of Apop. But Apop is depicted with a human face, and he has two hands in adoration. It's hard to say if it's an image of a military triumph or an image of a prayer. There's the sun and the moon. This duality of everything in the world is depicted on the private stela of the ocean god, which he donated to the temple of Seth in Ombos. Everything related to the adoration of Mahat is a prerogative of not only priests but also artists. You need to worship your god. In Egypt there's a beautiful image system. First of all, you have a city god. There's the city of Neot in ancient Egyptian. The city has a city god, Neot. If you were born in Philo, Ammon is your protector. You were born on his land. It's your deity. The deity of your native land plays a huge role for them. They say beautifully to be on the waters of your god, because the god's boat floats on the lake in your temple, or to be in the shadow of your god. Being in the shadow of your god is very important because you can feel the god, not only in the temple. For example, you have a sacred mountain. You came to the sacred mountain. You feel the god there. Your God is in your heart. It was said by Tehachate in the 24th century BC. When you sit in the shadow of the mountain of the sacred place, you are in the shadow of your God. This multi-level knowledge of the divine world is a pestilence in Egypt because there's no priest as a mediator between man and God. A priest keeps the tradition. A priest serves God. A priest supports the ritual of saving the world. A priest keeps the tradition of wisdom. He teaches man, but he can't replace man's prayer to God, with which man turned to God. It's very important. For artists, I repeat, the bird is a special story. The Imam too, because Egyptian art is based on the rules of the canon. For the great ruler of the canon is the goddess Maat. Wherever there is a rule, there is a goddess Maat. Mr. Arunafer was an outstanding Egyptian artist in the 13th century BC. He was one of the managers of a team that made royal tombs in the Valley of Kings. Here, on the wall of his own tomb in Deir el Medine, Arunafer puts his wife behind him, and he, disguised as an ordinary artist, brings to God the board, the figure of the goddess Maat, which is on the sign of the ruler. The goddess Maat for the Egyptians is related to the idea of personal nobility. It's very important for them. For them it was very important, for example, there was a holiday, a specific story with a specific text, the holiday of the goddess Hathor in Thebes, and a man fell asleep. They pushed him, probably gave him a pillow, said that he behaved badly on the holiday and disturbed him, because in a dream the goddess appeared to him and she spoke to him in a dream. To see the deity in a dream is very important. It's wonderful, it's wonderful. But there are hundreds of thousands of such dreams. There's only one when God speaks. And she spoke to him and answered all his questions, which actually were related to his life. And at that moment, he is interrupted by being pushed. How can you sleep on such a big holiday? In the end, he writes it all down on a stele, puts it next to the temple of his village in order to pass on to the future generations that he had such a case. Here is a very interesting moment of the dream of the Egyptian religion, because in the common background in every way of interacting with the gods, there is no better experience and no worse experience. There is your experience, and it is important for other people. Maybe someone will learn something from this experience and pass it on to the descendants. So I start with this wonderful painting, and I actually want to show a lot of different images of different eras when a man is depicted in the centre of the 4th century BC in the Metropolitan Museum. A large stele of the 13th century BC, also by a great Tsarist artist who worshipped Ptah and Maat. Everything exists, everything lasts, everything changes. We are born, but we age. Time is the main enemy of the gods and people of ancient Egypt. And for an ancient Egyptian, it is very important to win time in different ways. There are many ways, but for example, you can win time by the fact that your prayer will exist forever. You take a stele and order it to a Tsarist artist. There is your favourite goddess, and you put it in the temple. You die, and the stele exists. The prayer is constantly recited at the magical level. Or, for example, something happened and you got an answer to your question. Then you order such a statue of yourself carrying Maat and give it to the temple. It is kept in the temple for 50, 70 years. Then the courtyards were filled with such things. They carefully dug a pit, laid all these statues, and the courtyards were opened for the next offerings. At the same time, the courtyard becomes a more sacred place, because the holiness of all sculptures greatly increases the sacred status of this place. Therefore, we know a lot about such figures. And accordingly, in addition to such a purely ritual practice, we must understand that there was also a constant practice of serving the goddess Maat. This is all connected with the category of saints. Saints are people of knowledge, people of literacy. Some people specialise in astronomy, some specialise in mathematics, or perhaps in geometry in order to measure the fields. They all serve not only the one who is the main god, but also the goddess Maat. And Egyptian texts comment a fragment of a painted relief from the tomb of the nobleman Ti in the 25th century BC by Saqqara. These are the saints who rule the great vizier, who are present at the ceremony of the temple and nobleman's household. When we talk about Maat and Isafet, we must, of course, remember that Egypt went through many eras, when there was turmoil, when there was a murderous war, and of course we want to look more at the colonnade of the Luxor temple than at those periods when two kings were left one by one with a ship. I'm not exaggerating. There are such kings who have one ship, that's it, there's nothing else. Or when the Greek historians who worked with the ancient Egyptian chronicles talk about the 70 kings of Memphis who rule for 70 days. This is a beautiful image of the interweaving when there is no right king, when the world is turned upside down. This is what is said in several Egyptian texts. In one of them, in Apur's speech, a man who saw a civil war says that the world is turned upside down, that the world is turned upside down as if it were on a potter's wheel. This is such a figurative thing. And the fact that the Egyptian texts, which testify about the periods of turmoil between the Usobites is exactly what the Egyptians see as the fulfillment of Esophet. This is what Moad opposes. The prophecy of Neferti, the fragment before you, the hermitage. What will happen to this country when the sun goes down and there will be no more light so that people can see it? Will there be no hidden clouds and everything will wither away, having lost it? Will the river of Egypt be cut off and waters will be able to cross? Will the southern wind overcome the northern, and there will not be a single moment? Will the enemies come from the east? The Asians will descend into Egypt, and there will be a country in turmoil. I do not know what will happen to it. I will show you my son as an enemy, and my brother as an enemy, and the man who killed his father. All mouths will pray for compassion, but all good will disappear, and the country will perish, for Moad will be destroyed. This is Esophet as a social destruction, as a social contradiction. You know, there is an interesting detail here that it's not only about the era of turmoil, but also about a man who is absolutely free. A man who is absolutely free in his actions and in his will and statements most likely follows Esophet, but not Moad, because Moad assumes that he follows according to the commandments of his fathers. Egypt is still the ancient East, and this correspondence to the canon is necessary due to the fact that after the era of the pyramids, after the ancient kingdom, Egypt fell into the abyss between the precipice of war, the brotherhood of murderous Rasparia. What does a person think who came at such a time? It tells not only about these chronicles, prophecies, stories, but also a wonderful text. I will recommend you to find it on the internet and read it all. A conversation of the disappointed with his Bey, a conversation of the disappointed with his soul. When a person is sitting, he's so tired of this life, he sees everything that happens around him so terribly, and he sits, and his soul, his own Ba, and he describes everything that he sees in front of his soul, and says that he wants to commit suicide. And when he says this, his Ba will tell him in anger that he will not come to the funeral court, that he will do everything so that the entity will not appear later. Egyptians were very tough, very negative about suicide, but the text with which this disappointed with his own soul addresses is amazing. To whom should I open my greedy hearts today? To whom should I open my greedy hearts today? Good people have come out from the depths of the forced one. To whom should I open my greedy hearts today? He has no end. When the appropriate time, the appropriate era will come. And if, on the one hand, an ordinary Egyptian thinks about it, well, an enlightened person, since this text was written, this is quite a specific literary work, then the king also thinks about it in the same way. And here, on the one hand, there is that half of the personality of the Egyptian kings, which is divine. And here we remember the bells of the Grand Prince in Luxor, or the 20-metre royal statue in Abu Simbel. But he was also the one who had the second human half, who was born by the earthly mother of the queen. And therefore, among this genre, I have already mentioned the genre of wisdom. There are several amazing works that were written by kings, and then they were rewritten many times by writers who understood that this was important knowledge. And when, for example, the king Amenemhet Fars, who ruled in the 20th century BC, was killed by his own warriors, guards, for raping a woman from the royal house. And then he came to his son, Sonsut I, and began to tell him many useful things. And there is one phrase that I love very much. There are no sons of the king at night. There's such a phrase written there when everything is confused, because night is not the day, and there is no mat and there is no order. A great text, despite the fact that it is in such a sad state, is probably one of the most famous appeals of the king to his son. This is the speech of the king Aheti from Heracleopolis to his son Merikeri. A unique text is kept in the state hermitage. There are several scrolls in which there are no analogues in other museums of the world. And there's a great figure of the goddess Mat, approximately from the 10th, 9th centuries BC, in the collection of the Louvre. I will read a fragment of this text, because in my opinion it is absolutely delightful. A generation of people passes by. God, who knows the essence, has hidden himself. Honour the gods on their way. He relies on this heart. The goodwill of the righteous is accepted more than that of the sinner. Do good for God, and he will do the same for you. Yes, people will love you. They will remember you for your goodness. Wisdom is created by knowledge. Look, their words remain recorded. Turn your scrolls, the traces of wisdom, for the one who learns will become skillful. Do not be evil, be kind. Life passes on earth, it is not long. The one who leaves a memory of himself flourishes. The righteous lives forever. The one who goes with Osiris, like the free, avoids death. Judges judge the wise. No, they're not merciful at the hour when they fulfill their duties. It is bad when they accuse the wise. Do not hope for long years. They look at life as for 1 hour. Things remain after the death of a person. They are put in a pile next to him. Eternity is being there, and the one who neglects this is foolish. But the one who achieves this, does not sin, will be like God, the free walking, like the Lord of eternity. Take care of people in God's pasture. He created heaven and earth for them according to their desire. He destroyed the darkness. He created air for them so that their noses would live. This is a likeness of God that came out of his body. He ascends to heaven according to their desire. He created plants for them, cattle, birds to feed them. He killed the enemies of demons and destroyed their children for their hostile plans. He created light according to their desire, and he travels on the boat of heaven to see them. He raised a sanctuary for himself behind them and hears when they cry. He created a czar for them as a support to support the weak's back. He created magic for them, stronger than a weapon, to reflect what can happen. He created dreams day and night. He kills a rebel among them, like a person kills his son for the sake of his brother. Do not cause suffering. My lips give laws to the czar. Open your face so that you may rise as a person. This is a small fragment of this absolutely amazing text. I recommend you to read it. Fortunately, there are excellent Russian translations. This is a translation by Rebecca Rubinstein. What is surprising here is that, first of all, people are similar to men. Oh, it's not about slaves. It's about beloved children. This is the first thing. The second thing is about a rebel. God kills, like a person kills his son for the sake of his brother. A lot has been said here. And for the Egyptians themselves, these texts by Sabaid, I repeat, are the support of Mat. Mat is an example. Egypt does not like theoretical knowledge. They always think with examples, and they explain with examples. This is not only an Egyptian feature. For the ancient East, for the East in general, a person learns better, as we know, with examples. And here they are, magnificent images of the goddess Ma'at, which is used in the temple space. We go to the temple. In my opinion, this is the most beautiful bronze Ma'at we know. This is the 12th to 10th centuries BC. It is kept in the Brooklyn Museum in New York. It sits on a pedestal, and on the sides the sacred winged snake is kept in the mask of Hathor, the goddess of love and motherhood. 2 mothers, remember, a combination of 2 mothers, Hathor and Mat. Mat and Hathor. This is also present here. What is this figure for? The thing is that the king, during the service, performing many rituals of sacrifice, setting up a conversation with the gods at some point when everything is ready, and he is responsible for the fact that everything is done for the gods in this temple. And he also tries to guarantee that his time is good and people do not suffer much, and he at least tries to be a good lord. Then at this moment he brings the statue of the goddess Maat to God. Absolutely amazing. A very rare monument. It is now on your right. It is kept in the Louvre. This is a silver statue of King Seti I. It was once placed on a large boat for the gods. And here the silver king with a golden belt in his hand brings the golden figure of the goddess Maat, which is still on the sign of the kingdom, which we will talk about now. Let's imagine how it could have been. I will go with you to Obidos, the great temple of Seti I, the great legend of the 13th century to the new era. I always say that if you want to feel how ancient Egypt feels, go to Obidos, because there you will see not only great ruins, but something that surprisingly preserved the atmosphere that was in the second millennium to the new era. And here in this temple, which in November, when the month of Hayak begins, the holy month of the god Osiris, it is so amazingly pierced by the rays. There is a remarkable relief that I want to show you. Let's look at it carefully. This is the final part of the worship. A huge wooden naos is opened where the cult statues of the gods stand. Their bodies were changed on them, and the statues of their bodies were adorned with oils. They were given the necessary offerings. There is a very complex structure of gifts, from meat to flowers, laden, fabric, incense. There is a certain structure of the ritual offering. It differs from different gods because someone needs meat as a sacrifice and someone prefers fragrant oil. There is a difference here. And when all this has already happened, here they are, the gods. They are present here in the sanctuary. This is Osiris, Isidda, Ihor, the great triad of Abydos. Look carefully at the throne where Osiris is sitting, the form of Maat. He sits on behalf of the goddess Maat. And then Tsar Seti, a fantastic work, of course. The relief of the epoch of Seti I is a super legend. Tsar Seti brings the figure of the goddess to the open door of the sanctuary while holding his left hand in the position of prayer. And the hieroglyphic line below gives us the following: the offering of Maat to the ruler of Maat. Notice literally a couple of frames, I'm already saying that the figure itself stands on the sign of the ruler. What is it about? Speech is a very important thing. Let's say you came to the temple from the point of view of the ancient Egyptians. You brought bread, ploughed the field, collected the grain, ground the flour, baked it, and brought the bread. Did the grain grow by your will? No. But you put in the work. You ploughed, pressed, ground the flour, and baked. And what you put from your heart at the moment when you needed this cake as your offering to God. Bread is a convenient way for you, I'd say, to concentrate, to find a way of interaction, to find this gift to God. You can't give God to God, says the Egyptian text. And when you bring Maat, you bring it to the ruler, but you bring it as a sign that in your world, if you are a king or a queen, at this moment you did everything you could for Maat to triumph. And when you bring Maat to God, what is above and what is in you is the true sacrifice. And if it is so, according to the Egyptian ideas, at this moment, Maat, which he brings, begins to resonate with his heavenly sister. The heavenly doors open for a few moments, great divine spirits, and then they give the grace and everything the king asks from them revering them in such a way. Here is the text I drew attention to as it was bequeathed from the centuries gone by. It is necessary to emphasize that this is a tradition that we do as our ancestors did. This is very important for the ancient Egyptians. It is based on this heart, says Khagemni, one of the authors of the teachings of what we call wisdom. And once again, a voluminous figure, the same as the first silver one from the Louvre, so that you can imagine how it happened inside the temple. Maat is always present at the monuments associated with the most important divine rituals. And here in Abydos, I am now showing you a very beautiful stela from the Louvre, which was made for the priest Neferhotep. He honours Osiris and all his deceased ancestors, which are depicted in the lower register. But I am interested in something else, what is depicted in timpani. So in the centre there is a huge reliquary tower in which, according to the tradition, Isis buried Osiris's head in Abydos. Isis and Nephthys, Isis on the right, Nephthys on the left, support this reliquary. Inside there is Osiris's head, divine banners. Here is the choir of Osiris's son, his protector. Here is the great lord of the temple who brings Maat. In the far left part of the stela there is Upuaut, the god who opens the way. And here she is, Maat, the daughter of the son of Satra. She is also here. She is needed not only for the life of the temple of people, she is needed for the gods, so that their inner cycles, their inner rituals, their structure of interaction was carried out correctly. And we are actually talking about the great Shetau, the mysterious mysteries of Osiris in Abydos, when in the desert beyond Abydos, I think many people remember this frame, there's the great gorge Pegasus. According to the legend, there are the main gates to the other world. Here the Egyptians worshipped their kings from the end of the 4th millennium BC. Here is the oldest tomb of the Egyptian kings, and here every Egyptian dreamed of making a pilgrimage during his lifetime to honour his ancestors. And if he didn't have time, the descendants would come, let's say the poor descendants. The poor descendants would take a pot. Everyone has a pot. Write the name of the grandfather who didn't make it to Abydos, bring a pot of Abydos and bury it. It's not a joke, it was quite so. And the grandfather, through his name, through the hands of his grandchildren, would come to Abydos with his subtle essence, because in the mysteries of Osiris in Abydos there was an opportunity to be present in the mysteries of God, both physically and by means of the names of these monuments. And here, in the place where Osiris goes through death, through rebirth, through the discovery of his integrity, a stunning statue of Osiris, the 7th century BC, the Cairo Egyptian Museum. Here, where it would seem that super holy land where everything is dedicated to life, do you know what it's also called in the Egyptian texts? Tamat, the land of the goddess Maat, the land of truth. There is no place for lies here. There's no place for crime. There's no place for death. There is only life and truth. Therefore, the land of truth, as a designation of the necropolis where your ancestors are buried, the land of your truth, if you will, is a necessary formula that is present in the Egyptian burial texts. And here is Osiris' triumph, a wonderful painted relief from the ceilings of the temples of the Dendera choir. On both sides, from Osiris and Isis from right to left, the Maat is highlighted with a turquoise frame, and it stands here, raising its hands in a prayer to Osiris as a god of eternal life. But it is a guarantee that Osiris will triumph, that death will be redeemed, and life will gain its new cycle. The Maat is indisputable from the gods, and the Maat is indisputable from the kings. I'll give you an interesting example. The Del Moses have different dictionaries of the Tsar. There is a canon when you have a ruler and you depend on him and you write a large text, partly canonical, in your tomb or in your village, as you like, from your Tsar, and they are all written as if under a copy. Here, no need to exaggerate. It's clearly visible that everyone was allowed to write. Everyone wrote. Nothing changes. But sometimes something special happens and an educated person comes and thinks about something and writes a non-canonical text. And in the middle Tsar, the Del Moses of Numkatib II, the great chief of the province of the era of Amenemhet, said, he recalled how one of the Tsars of the beginning of this dynasty, Amenemhet II, he corrected Krivda, he established Moad, and he restored the correct Egyptian statehood. And in his tomb, as an example of his own literary work, he wrote the following: when His Majesty came, he corrected Esaphet. He rose like Samathan, the evening sun. He restored what he found in ruins. He restored what one city took away from another. He made his city a city that knew its borders. Border signs are strong like the sky now. Their waters are now there as written in the scriptures according to the old scrolls, for his love for Moad is so great. It is very important for the Tsar to show himself on the one hand and not to forget about the old scrolls, and not to forget that he continues the religious tradition of his ancestors. Moreover, we must remember that in the Egyptian version, at the time of the coronation, the Tsar inserts a part of the essence of the god Hora and becomes a new manifestation of Hora on earth. Accordingly, for the Egyptians, Hufu is Hormezd-Jiddu and Hafra is Horus Erib. There are the first Hora names. Who is he as an embodiment of Hora? And when he came here, thousands of years later, to Karnak, the temple of the god Ammon in Karnak, which was called Epiphysus of the most perfect of places. When the new Tsar came here, on the one hand, he wanted to immortalize himself, and on the other hand, he wanted to finish the monuments that the ancestors did not finish. He wanted to continue the tradition of the construction of this temple as the ancestors would like. And then, of course, everything turned out differently, because when the Tsar Rameses IV saw the hypostyle of the Karnak temple that was not completed by Rameses II, he covered all the unfinished columns with his own names and assigned this monument to himself. It is very difficult to relate to this, because on the one hand, the same Tsar Haiti, instructing his son Merikaro, says, don't take and don't spoil the monuments of the ancestors by mining pure stone. And on the other hand, they are the embodiment of Hora. That is, it seems to be, from the ritual point of view, they continue their own work. Therefore, the fact that from the Western point of view, well, a priori, they are usurpers, for them it was all different. And here is Karnakia Hatshepsut, who, as you remember, in the 15th century BC, became a very successful woman and pharaoh for 22 years. She's looking for a suit and support for her power everywhere, because from the point of view of the temple culture, it was, of course, illegitimate. And here she puts obelisks and says a very interesting phrase: I have made a shining truth, which is loved by the Omon. I know that it lives by it. Truly, my bread I eat from its shining. And here we are as people raised by the Western culture. How beautiful, a skillful woman, beautiful to say. And the ancient Egyptian will understand completely differently what it was, in fact. Hatshepsut, a saint of saints, opens her mouth, sticks out her tongue. She has special ritual ink on her tongue. The names and forms of the goddess Maat are written. A small figurine is made, the names and titles, and only after that she begins to read a certain canon of worship. To eat mat is literally the word to eat mat, because this is a part of a huge preparation of the first priest, king, queen, priest, who is the main person in this temple at the moment, from whom the conversation with this God will begin. And you know, when I was preparing today's lecture, I spent half an hour looking on the internet, and God is with him with the Russian internet, a normal international internet. Is there a temple of the goddess Ma'at? 90% of people say no, she is an abstract goddess. She did not have temples. I say right away that this is wrong. Just a couple of links that there was a temple somewhere in Karnak, that's all. Therefore, when I am told that you can find everything on the internet, yes, remember this thing, because once here in Karnak, I'll show you where exactly. Let's first look at the reconstruction of the entire temple complex. Let's turn to the wonderful work of my favourite French artist archaeologist, Jean-Claude Goulvin. He does such amazing things. This is Karnak for the 4th century BC. The central part, this is the temple of the god Amun. There, further to the south, the goddess Maat, the temple of the god Lunaikon, the son of Zeus, and here to the north, now there will be arrows. It will be easier for you to understand. There is the temple of the god Maimonides. Let's first look at this. Here in the very centre, Hatshepsut, which I just mentioned, places a sanctuary called the Mat Palace. It was a special sanctuary. It was intended for royal coronations. And then when we can sometimes adequately translate and perceive the Egyptian text, we start reacting to the phrase, because Hatshepsut, when he built it, he said, "My heart is green." To make your heart green is to be reborn, to rejoice. It's just to be a very happy person. And here, this is a modern American reconstruction of at least the structure, because only a part remained. Here was the Mat Palace, where there were royal coronations, where there were main services. From this structure, something remained. Starting from the entrance area, where the god Amun touches the nostrils of his king's son, it's clear that after Hatshepsut's death, all of its parade images were destroyed because it was an illegitimate ruler. But anyway, the choir on the left and the one on the right pour sacred water, which is a symbol of eternal life, into the silhouette of Hatshepsut. This is the first big thing that was connected to the mat in this temple. And later the structure was completed by the successor Hatshepsut, Thutmose III. This is the outer wall of the temple, the gifts to the god Amun in Karnak, starting from the obelisk and ending with, I love this fragment, a bowl with pieces of turquoise. These are huge pieces of sacred turquoise, because Mevkat turquoise is the sacred stone of the mother goddess. It was always a part of the offerings. And the vessels and the jewellery and some incredible jewellery and oils and everything that was needed for this temple, everything is among the gifts of Thutmose III on the wall of the Mat Palace, because what he does corresponds to the principles of the mat. The second temple that interests me more, despite the fact that it is poorly preserved, the blue arrow points at it. This is a closed area for visiting in Karnak. French scientists began to dig there in the 1930s and 1940s, and there Amenhotep III builds a very special sanctuary. He builds the temple of the mother goddess. What did this temple look like? Let's first look at the plan on the left, a bright white structure. This is the temple where the mat is present in the courtyard of the god Amun, the ruler of Karnak. Sphinxes from Grenadieri, pink obelisks, pink granite, fragments of these obelisks are preserved. Then there is an open courtyard and sacred premises, and what is on top is the Temple of the Maat. It had a very special function because in the 11th century, before the new era, that is 350 years after the construction of this temple, royal tombs began to be looted in the Tsar's Valley, and a council was convened to decide what to do, how to save the royal tombs. It was convened in the Temple of the Maat in Karnak, in the Temple of Truth. It was also a zone of a special royal council on very important issues. A large number of very beautiful sculptures were found there despite the damage. A wonderful image. On the right is the Museum of Egyptian Art in Luxor. There is a large statue of the god Amun, and in front of him is the kneeling Amenhotep III as his son. The problem of this place is in the centre there is a village nearby. Unfortunately, from the beginning of the new era, the Temple of Montu and the Temple of Maat in Karnak were disassembled for the construction of houses, foundations, mosques, and everything else. Why am I showing the old frame? I have my own frame. This is a frame from a French excavation, and more or less at least somehow you can see the structure of a small, very proportional but very significant temple for ancient Egypt. The most amazing thing is that despite the loss of significant architectural forms, there is an inscription of Amenhotep III about this temple. It was called Haimat, a shining truth. The king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Nebmatra, the image of Ra before both lands, he created this monument for the father of his Amun, the ruler of the thrones of both lands. The temple was recreated for him in white stone, excellent, together with beautiful fev, without destroying what was before. With attention, it is completely covered with electrum. Its gates are covered with true electrum. It is decorated with all the stones, revered, precious, from the number of Denmark, brought from the countries of the south. All its floors are in gold. All its gates are of cedar and Asian copper, brought to Denmark from the countries of the north. It is similar to the horizon of the sky for the ruler of silver, the mistress of gold, that is Maat. All the stones, revered and precious, collected in it, the place of residence of the ruler of the gods, became in it similar to his heavenly throne. And now this text and French studies of the 1940s explain the reason why it is in such a state. How did the ancient Egyptians do it? Thin holes are drilled into one line in the stone. Small wooden dowels are inserted there. Then electrum sheets are taken, alloy of gold and silver, or golden sheets, and the gates, floors, parts of columns are covered with them. This was often done in Karnak. All the floors are of Maat. They bear traces of jubilee with golden pieces. The Temple of Truth has golden floors, electrum walls, all decorated with the best, revered stones brought from the south. This is Hesmon, an amethyst, which was a sacred stone of the goddess of truth. Turn on your imagination. Do you know why we came here first of all? To tear off gold and destroy it with electrum. Once it was something absolutely incredible that flourished for at least 5 centuries. Those who served in this temple, priests, were given the right to order statues and build in the courtyard of the temple. Oh, in Louvre there is a statue of one of such priests. Look at the sacrifice stand he holds in his hands. Ammon and Maat are held in his hand. These are the gods who were the most important inside the sanctuary. Both Maat, earthly Maat and heavenly Maat, are important for the king in the temple, not only because through their union and resonance the service is built. In many preserved images, both Maat are present next to the king as a sign of his nobility. It means that he really tries to bring his earthly realities to some standards of heavenly Maat. The big holiday of the god Min, the god of fertility, is depicted on the wall of the courtyard of the temple of Ramses III, Maiden at Abu, in the 12th century BC. First I will show a fragment, then the whole scene. Look at the royal palanquin. It is a huge wooden structure with a throne inside. The throne is decorated with images of lions, falcons and sphinxes. This is Minbit, the throne of the sun god. It is from these thrones that you will remember the vampire's legs, the chairs, the legs of the lions. It all goes up to Minbit, the throne of the sun god. He sits like a living heir on the throne of the sun god with two figures of Maat behind him. On the king's head there is one of his crowns. It is the crown of Kepresh, a military leather blue helmet. It was often used in battles as the most comfortable crown. But this crown has another symbolism. This crown reflects the right of the king to the throne given to him by the gods. So when he wears a Maat, or when he has to show himself as a legal king, he will be depicted in the crown of Kepresh. Behind him there are two goddesses of Maat who cover him with their wings. Earthly Maat, heavenly Maat, and Kepresh shows the king's connection with these goddesses. This is how the procession looks like. The god of the mines is riding on the triumphant platform. The festivities were incredible. And look at the ostrich feathers that are stuck in the heads of all the noblemen who go to this procession, because it corresponds to the truth and the order. This is one of the festivities that brings back the order in our time. The goddess of Maat is present as a winged defender in the images where some cult statues associated with oracles are shown. We will talk about this in the Egyptian court very soon. The thing is that in Egypt, the oracle was higher than the court. And even if the decision of the court was fully approved, during a large festival, for example, in the Fives on the western coast, there was a festival dedicated to the king Menhotep Fence. Here is Menhotep Fence, a relief from the Louvre. He is carried by the priests on a pedestal. The king is protected by the Maat on both sides. Menhotep I is a real historical figure who ruled in the 16th century before the new era. He was a good king. Even the mummy was preserved. He was considered a saint. And then, even if the decision was approved, 2 wooden plates are taken. For example, it's written that Amen-Nad stole the grain. Amen-Nad did not steal the grain. And these plates with 2 diametrically opposite statements are carried by the statue of God. And then the oracle happens. We do not know how it happened. They never describe it in detail. They say the following: when this plate was brought and then God twice approved it, I will not guess. We do not know. If a good man appears in the 14th century before the new era, who describes in detail what he saw, he will be honoured. So far there is no such text. God approved it twice. And the story about these oracle statues which are protected by the goddess Maat is a great happiness, because there was already a trial and a decision was already made, not in their favour, and they turned to the oracle of God, and God decided otherwise. In the tomb of one nobleman, I show a drawing because the original is poorly preserved. The story is told that there was a man, Amen-Nad. He owned this tomb. He was deceived by a man who was Rechen-Nad, and with the help of the oracle, he proved his innocence. From the temple, from the door, they take out such special handkerchiefs of Amen-Nad I around Bikit Apahal, made of ostrich feathers. And then the statue is taken out by the oracle. In front of it, they make incantation, and the decision is already visible despite the damaged part. They tell the priests, who stand here with flowers and sisters with ritual rags. One of them starts beating the tambourine because it's great, because our people supported it. So there is God's justice, this God's justice that a man dreams of. In Egypt it was expressed in the form of the oracle of gods and goddesses. If someday there will be something more detailed about how it was, we will have a sensation. Unfortunately, we can only guess, although in many texts the fact of the oracle is mentioned. Everything else that didn't reach God's ears has to be decided by a man whose name is Chati, the great vizier, because he is the great judge. Remer was the great vizier in the later years of the reign of Tsar Thutmose III, that is in the 15th century before the new era. He is depicted here with his mother sitting in front of the victim. Pay attention to the white clothing that looks like a tube and is tied around the neck with a cord. This is how Chate's specific clothing looks like. The vizier always wears the statue of the goddess Maat because he is her high priest. A magnificent azure suspension with a golden snake and a golden feather from the 10th and 9th centuries before the new era is the Cairo Egyptian Museum. If you come to Fiwa and go to see the tombs of Necropolis, be sure to look at Remer, because in that part of his tomb that is available to the public, which was supposed to be, he had worked in the Temple of Ammon and his sculptors worked there, and they made bricks well in his time, not in any other time, but in his time, and the brick was particularly durable. He was following the orders of the Tsar. He was receiving foreign ambassadors from the north and the south, and everything that was going on in his courtyard, all this was detailed, painted, and drawn on the walls of his tomb. This is what he observes in the temple of the god Ammon, and there are a lot of paintings, not for the sake of peace, but paintings that will show you what was really going on in the department of the great vizier. But at the same time, Remer, first of all, his career ended in a quarrel with the Tsar. We don't know what happened, but his name was erased. The image of a blind eye and lips so that he would not receive the funeral demands was not made. Apparently it was not so simple, but in his tomb he orders to write down the instruction to the great vizier, which is written down directly from the mouth of the Tsar Thutmose III. How did it happen? It's quite amazing. The whole nobility is going to appoint the great vizier, and the Tsar begins to read the canonical appointment as it should be. And the text is very funny. It is translated into Russian. Vasily Vasilievich Trugov translated it. I will read it to you today. It is like going to the other side of those things, about the heavenly truth. So such high and beautiful things about an official. But the thing is that the nobility is the mother of every official. Of course, he is a good official who does his job well. Here are a few more frames from the tomb. This is the sculptural workshop of the great vizier, brought to the temple of Ammon. All this can be seen in detail on the walls of the tomb of Remer. And here is his vizier, Thutmose III, from whose mouth the text I will read to you. Before I do that, I will quote one more phrase that was not included in the official canon, because the tomb was being built at the end of his life, and at some point Remer says, my duty was that the sorrow was bitter. That is, he dared to write the truth, even in the eternity of his tomb. The order of the official reception at the command of the high-ranking Vizier Sonovnik, the decree on how the mayor of Fifa Vizier's residence in the Vizier's chamber, it concerns everything that Sonovnik will do. When the vizier will listen in the vizier's chamber, he will sit on a seat with a back. There will be a canopy on the floor, a blanket on it, a leather pillow behind his back, under his feet a leather pillow too, and a scythe next to it. In front of him there will be 40 leather scrolls with the affairs of this country. On both sides in front of him there will be nobles belonging to the top 10 of the high-ranking Egyptians. To the right of him there will be the chief of the reception. To the left of him the head of the reception. Next to him the writers of the high-ranking vizier. One will speak only after the other, after each person standing opposite him. They will listen one after another, not allowing the last one to be heard earlier than the first one. If the first one says, "Next to me there is no one who should be heard," he will be seized by the trusted high-ranking official and severely punished. Reports to the high-ranking vizier. He will be reported on the closure of the fences on time, and on the opening of them on time. He will be reported on the state of the fortresses of the south and the north. When everything that has the right to leave the palace will be released, he will be reported on everything that has access to the palace, and he will also be reported on it. As for everything that has access and everything that has the right to leave the residence, when they will enter and when they will leave, it will be entrusted to him to let them in and let them out. He will be reported on by the chiefs of Sautin and all the officials and chiefs of their affairs. Then he will come in to greet the lord of the Pharaoh, who will be alive, unharmed and healthy. He will report to him on the state of both lands in his house every day. He will enter the palace at the same time as the chief of the treasury. He will stop at the northern pillar for the flags. Then the lord of the Pharaoh will come out of the palace door and stand at the southern pillar for the flags. Then the chief of the treasury will meet him and report to him the following: "All your affairs are in order. All your affairs are in order. The palace is safe and unharmed." Then the chief of the treasury will report to the chief of the treasury the following: "All your affairs are in order. All the establishments of the residents are safe and unharmed. I have been informed about the closing of the gates and opening of the gates by all the officials." After these two officials have reported to each other, the chief of the treasury will open all the gates of the palace to let in and let out everyone who has the right to go out. He will be entrusted to take care that everything is recorded. Let not a single official assign himself the right of sentence in his chamber. If there is a complaint about one of the officials present in his chamber, he will be ordered to bring him to the court. Let not a single official assign himself the right of corporal punishment in his chamber. He will be reported about every case concerning his chamber, so that he may pass it on. As for each trusted official assigned to another official, from the highest official to the lowest official, let him not be imprisoned and brought to the official. He will pass the order to the chief of the treasury, standing in front of the official when passing the order, and going out to stand as a sign of respect for him. This trusted official will bring the local princes and mayors to the court. This trusted official will give the warrant. Complaining, the trusted official will report as follows: "I was sent with an order to bring such and such official. He ordered me to bring such and such candlesticks to my neck." All will be punished according to the warrant in his chamber, any punishment except for cutting off a part of the body signed by the Tsar. The text is actually very long. It was important to me to convey to you the spirit of bitterness and regret written by Rukmir, who existed in all this. May God save you from standing at the North Pole for flags if you should have stood at the South Pole. In all this high flight of Egyptian culture, canonical official culture, as it was in ancient China, India, Egypt, is absolutely identical, and nothing could be done. Although, of course, the tasks that lay on the Great Vizier were huge. There were expeditions, revisions of military property, the whole structure. Looking at this statue of Utmos III of Karnak, Luxor, the Egyptian Museum of Art, it is more interesting to remember that Egypt had a double court. The court of this first institution, as you said, Kenebeth, it is a public court where the elders of a certain district or ministry or institution, and they judge the situation based on how their ancestors in Egypt, unlike Babylon, Assyria, Mesopotamia, there are no judges. It is amazing. There is no written canon of the law, and there is no royal judge. That is, the situation is considered based on the circumstances and in accordance with the sentence of that very Ma'at. And then you sign that it corresponds to the Ma'at, and it is your direct responsibility in the funeral trial that you signed. Very interesting things. For example, one lady who lived in the village of the builders of the royal tombs, she met with a tragedy. A rapist attacked her. She was defiled. She turned into Kenebeth, and she was found innocent because she was not guilty. Another lady got the right to dispose of her own testament as her own property. And others came and said that we need a tomb, but we don't have money to build a tomb. Of course, there was no money at that time. We said, no problem. There is a beautiful abandoned tomb. There are good people there. We give you the tomb and appoint you as the children of these people. You continue to use this tomb, bury your own, but you have to honour them as your own relatives. All this is done at the level of Kenebeth, the oldest council. In fact, there's a very interesting example in the Islamic Egypt of the Middle Ages when the first court was Qadi. They chose a smart man, he became Qadi, and he judged based on the Sharia norm, not on the legal norm. This is typical for Egypt in general. And there is another court, Jedjat. Jedjat is a ritual court. The burial court is Jedjat. This is the highest court. This is the highest measure. This is something that has a ritual subtext. There are several cases when the judges of the supreme Jedjat made wrong decisions and were caught, and they were burned alive in the furnaces of the goddess Mut, with all the love of Egypt for man, despite the fact that there were no human sacrifices. But the oath of crime, crime against the king, crime against Mut, at such a high level, it was punished like this. We have a lot of images, statues preserved from different judges and from different viziers, and I want to show you a few of them now. 1 second. The far left is Imhotep, the great vizier of Djoser, an architect, an astronomer, a priest, a prophet, and a thinker, a man who built the first Egyptian step pyramid in Saqqara, and who was the creator of the calendar of 365 days, which was based on the Gregorian calendar. In the centre is Beser, the great vizier of Ramses II. If Imhotep is the 27th century BC, this is the 13th century BC. Imhotep in Louvre. The middle statue is the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization in Fustat, Cairo. The statue was placed in Karnak. He was a special person for Ramses II. He was one of his educators since childhood. And when young Ramses ascends to the throne, Beser immediately becomes the great vizier again. He was also a great vizier with his father Preseti, because he was a kind, wise second father who began to help Ramses to rule. He was a very famous person. On the far right is a statue from Louvre. This is the Hellenistic period, Ptolemy, I think you've noticed. But this is a great vizier because the figure of the goddess Maat, this attribute is very important here. On the far left is a statue from Baltimore, the Museum of Art Walters. They took a statue of a vizier from the 13th dynasty, that is from the 18th century to the new era, and then wrote the names of a completely different person on it 1,000 years later. But leaving the style of the epoch, his headdress, his clothes, this combination of a wig and a high-waisted waistcoat with a lace, this is a vizier. And the same thing in the centre is a vizier from the Metropolitan Museum of New York. This is also such an amazing attire that always distinguishes a great vizier. And also about the 18th century to the new era, a little later, a vizier named An Hu. This was a famous person, and in 2023 his tomb was found and all the logic of his career was collected. So let's take An Hu as an example and look at the successful fate of a great vizier. He served under Tsar Sobek Katepi II, that is, as I said, from the 18th century to the new era. His father was a vizier of Samantu, that is a vizier, son of a vizier. He became, in turn, the father of two more successive viziers, Rasenebo and Ameru, that is his children. This is again a vizierate. The family was one of the most well-known and influential in Egypt, and the clan was strengthened by successful marriages. An Hu's daughter, a noble lady, Raseneba Haines, got married to the manager of the palace property, Upo Katepe, who was also a relative of Sarina A, which gave the clan a special power and a special patronage to the Tsar. An Hu served several Tsars. His career began under Kanjeri, continued under Sobek Katepi II, Murmishao, and Sobek Kakara and Mtefi. That is, Tsars change. This is a period of interdependence. For many of you, these names are absolutely new. You have never heard them. This is a transitional period. And the vizier, he is the son of a vizier, and his children are viziers, and everything is fine with him. And this is not the story of Remer. Monuments named after An Hu were installed in the Temple of Osiris in Abydos and in the Temple of Amon in Karnak, where he installed a statue without the Tsar's permission in memory of his parents and in honour of himself. The tomb of An Hu is a very extensive complex for its time, and his assistants revered him very much. In particular, such a stela was found in the tomb of An Hu, which was made by his assistant. The assistant loved his vizier, and he decided to capture himself for eternity, respectively, next to the burial complex of his master. Therefore, the fates of the viziers, judging by the chat, were different. Another example, at the end of the reign of Amenhotep III, the great vizier was Ramos, and his tomb in Thebes was simply a grand palace. It was badly damaged by time, but if you step away from the damaged architecture and look at what is on the walls, it's fantastic. So we have Ramos, the great vizier, the master of the tomb. This is his cousin Amenhotep, who was the chief of the chariot troops, and his wife Depet. There's a whole feast going on. All the relatives are sitting there. The names are written for the funeral feast. Look at the wigs, the gold discs of military glory. He has a shibu on his neck, a necklace, the sceptre of a priest. Look at the knot cut out of the plastered linen fabric under her breast. These are absolutely fantastic things, and respectively the 14th century BC. Among them is Ramos himself, who was repressed at the end of his life. There was no burial in the tomb. The reliefs were not painted. They were deliberately led by the eye through a magic ritual of opening the mouth and eyes. And here is Ramos himself. By the way, let's move on and look at the second column of the text. And the upper sign is the tongue stretched out. The circle is crossed out. It is crossed out for such segments. This tongue is the Emirau, the chief of something. The circle is crossed out. The cross is the bread. And the vertical stick is the city. The Emirau is the city chief. That is the chief of Fifth. And then there is a bird, a fat bird which shouts. And behind it is the bread and the vertical stick. This is the city chief, the great Emirau. Why was it crossed out? Most likely this is a sign that means the word chat in the Egyptian hieroglyphic script. But the word Emirau is crossed out in the form of a fat, shouting bird. If you see it, you will understand what I'm talking about. The whole scene is on the left. He is cleansed by water. He enters his own tomb. He was famous, rich, and incredibly influential under Amenhotep III. He is portrayed as one of the St. Petersburg Sphinxes. He was fiercely hated by the son of Amenhotep III, Akhenaten, with whom he was repressed. Most likely, in the years of the religious coup of Akhenaten, he did not support the new idea of the new Tsar. This is why many Favan nobles were repressed. So on the one hand there is a beautiful tomb, unfinished, without a burial, which in fact bears the history of the tragedy of this Tsar. The cast iron bust of Akhenaten is clearly a Berlin museum from the later years of his reign. Another vizier was the Vizier of the North. He was in Memphis, also in the era of Amenhotep III. His name was Aperle. He was a foreigner. This is absolutely amazing. A very talented foreigner could earn a high-ranking position. This is one of the sarcophagi of his tomb. In the 90s, the French found his tomb, and there is a niche deep underground. This is part of his tomb, and in the niche you can see the figure of Osiris depicted frontally, which looks at you from the depth of the dungeon. The sarcophagus was decorated with such incrustations. Each element of the image of the divine hieroglyphic sign was a separate casting made of faience or glass. This is the face of the goddess who spreads her wings on the chest of Aperle's sarcophagus. All of this is now kept in the Saqqara Museum. There was another vizier and a monument related to him. The Prime Minister was not sorry for anything. This is such a sarcophagus of the vizier named Jemenet Harbak. He was a contemporary of the kings of the 7th century BC. On the one hand, there is an amazing work on Kruvaka, the embalmed body of Osiris, and the morning sunbeams. But what interests me and what is united by the turquoise circle is the figure of the goddess Mat, which is on his neck. That is, the position of the vizier is specially positioned even on this sarcophagus. Mat has a very special, let's talk a little, connection with the afterlife. Here, on the fragment of the papyrus in Es-Pakashuti from the Louvre, in the central, well, not central, the left scene, here is the sun, the god of the sun. In another world, in front of him is Mat. She is the support of everything that happens in the afterlife. On the other hand, on the right, again, she is Mat, in the form of a mummy with a characteristic feather on the headdress. She squeezes the snakes, the keepers of the new world, and again she carries life. For the afterlife, Mat is very important because she is the standard of the afterlife, and you perfectly understand what I mean. Let's first look at the principles of Mat in the royal tombs. The tomb of Ramses VI, the Valley of Kings, the 12th century BC, a fantastic combination of painted reliefs and secret books about the afterlife. And there, first of all, it is told about Mat as about that goddess whose reverence gives eternal life to the king. If on the right there is such a tomb image, then on the left there is an absolutely unique thing. In the tomb of Ramses V, one of the last rulers of the New Kingdom, they began to make a tomb in the Valley of Kings, and they didn't finish it, and apparently it was generally buried in the north. And there, right in the unfinished burial chamber, wax ritual objects were left, which are used for magic ceremonies and lighting of the burial chamber. What you see on the left is an anode. In fact, it does not repel the goddess, it's just that the wax is already waved a little. It also, as on the scene on the right, stands in front of the goddess, raising her palms in the prayer pose, and a sunbeam floats between them. These magical, unique objects, there are no analogues. They're kept in luxury in the Egyptian Museum of Art. Not only Ramses in front of Matt, but also lakes of fire, lakes of another world, with sacred baboon keepers. We do not know the ritual, but we have evidence of it. And here we should be very attracted to the material of wax, because the sacred insect of the goddess Maat is a bee, and its materials are wax and honey. It is a great sunny bee, which, according to the ancient Egyptians, wanders between the world of others and the world of ours. And the bees are the army of the goddess Maat. That is, the smallest black people from Mowgli, if I remember correctly, are the warriors of the goddess Maat, because she is irresistible in rage and nothing can stop her little warriors. Therefore, all bees, apes, and there were apes in the temples, because honey is the main sweet for ancient Egypt, and they did not have sugar. That is, honey, dried dates were added to the bread for sweetness. And so honey, honey, and honey. Therefore, the bee is the goddess Maat and her sacred insect. By the way, a very interesting image is now in front of you. In addition to the bee itself, there's a tomb, by the way, at the top of the tomb of the same Ramar who was the supreme vizier. The top is the apiary of the temple of the god Amun in Karnak, and honey is extracted from such elongated long nests. And what is at the top of the man's hands is a smoker who knows the apiary business. That is, it is there that these smoking cones are extracted by bees. And the lower relief is the first image of the apiary in the history of ancient Egypt. This is a drawing of the relief from the Temple of the Sun of the King Nusraini in Abu Ghurub. That is, it is the 25th century BC. And here you also have an apiary and a pouring of honey and a sacred bee. And here they are, nests installed vertically on top of each other. And this man also holds a smoker. Such vertical soldered constructions from long nests and tubes from soldered cylinders are still normal Egyptian Arab apiary. That is exactly the same forms of nests. You can find honey in Egypt on the internet and you'll find it all perfectly. And this is all the economy of the goddess Maat. Here's another very good example. In the first millennium BC, there was a great-grandfather, Pabos, who not only managed all the affairs of the great priestess, the wife of god Naitikeret, but he was also the chief of the tribe of Ammon in Karnak. And so in his tomb, here you have hives, here you have bees, here he shows his farm, which, according to the norms of the goddess Maat, was in full order. Let's go back to the royal tombs. Maat is associated with a great memory of the original times. After all, once there was no day and night. Egypt says there was no morning and there was no evening. There was no life and death. There was only life. There was Pabos, the golden age. And even the famous gods who fought with each other, Khorasetk, they were one being in the centre of this hieroglyph. One body and two heads, Khorasetk, and there were no two fighters. And in the text of the sarcophagi it is said perfectly, the time when there were no two things. Everything was in unity, this lost great unity about which Egypt dreams and yearns. Maat assumes that all enemies of the world order will be punished and executed. And here the red-hot goddesses of the new world punish the spirits of chaos and those who serve Asophet in order to, here they have a split head, and so on. For greater passion you can cook in a pot. And this is where early Christian stories about Asia were born, about the place where the pots are. In fact, here the hands of the mothers of the gods hold the great pots of the new world. The sacred cobras let the flame there, and there are bright red, beheaded tide, and in different pots there are bodies, souls, shadows, entities. They're divided by entities, and in each pot there is a full set, and all of this should postpone the end of the world. These are not hell or hellish punishments. There's absolutely no such thing in Egypt. This is how the triumphant court of Osiris is depicted, how the king leads. He leads a great ladder, like the one in the desert of Abydos. Osiris himself leads the scales. But in order for death not to be stolen, in order for mistakes not to be made, in order for there not to be any thorns in our beautiful fruit, it is necessary to take Asophet away from here and to send her far away, because in this place she does not need to be now. And Asophet is going to be in the form of a black pig, a luxurious black pig, which is taken away from the hall of Osiris under the protection of this beautiful monkey on a golden ladder, so that nothing happens to the great court of justification, where of course there can be no mistake. This is the tomb of Ramses VI. Quite often near Osiris, Maat is present on the sarcophagus. There are a lot of images. The sarcophagus of the 10th century BC. Here's a scene where Osiris sits on a snake of infinity, and you can see with what tenderness Maat holds it under his elbow, and at the same time the symbol of his life hangs on his hand. Maat is, by the way, Hecuba, the god of magic and magic art. In front of Osiris, his son Hor, and the god that embodies the actual word. In the meeting with Maat is the main theme of all the late texts. I will quickly show you such a run through the different scrolls. Among them, there will be things that you know well and that are rare. These are two fragments from the Book of the Dead by the singer god of Amun, the ruler of all gods, Nauni. This is the 11th to the 10th century BC, the Museum of Metropolitan New York. And here is the very centre, the action of the singer god of Amun with his sister with a musical instrument. In front of her, the gates of the Hall of Two Truths open, and there are 42 gods who are the helpers of the goddess Maat, and she begins to read her negative confession, assuring each god that she did not commit one of the 42 crimes. And on one side of the hall she only begins to read this prayer, and on the other side of the hall, sorry for the black and white frame, it's just not published, she stands and holds in her hands the sign of life and the sign of the sail. This sail is the Chow, the breath. This is the very breath of life that she must receive when she is justified in the afterlife of the gods. Here is her meeting with Osiris, Isis, and Nephthys. Behind her is the anthropomorphic appearance of the West. This is literally the personification of the West hieroglyph, the Great West, Necropolis, the place of meeting with ancestors, the place where the right broad ways lead us to the afterlife, to the world of gods. And here, having received this justification, she will receive the title that has now been highlighted by the black and white frame. Mahiru, the right voice, the truthful one. So all her testimony about her own honesty, decency and dignity was true. There are great monuments that you have all seen in books. This is a fragment of the papyrus of Hunefar of the 13th century BC. This is the great court of the gods. And here are these central scales where the heart of the deceased, and on the other one the same trousseau feather, or sometimes a figure of the goddess Maat. Moreover, here at Hunefar, the base of the pillar that holds Anubis is completed by the figure of the goddess Maat. Even the scales themselves are also a kind of embodiment of the truth. And here it is, the human heart. I love this amulet from the Metropolitan Museum. Look how amazing it is made. This is the heart, the magical heart that returns to the mummy. This is the prayer to the heart from the mother of Ma'at Tapadon. There's a testimony against me at the funeral trial. It is red, pulsating, filled with the thoughts, feelings, knowledge, intuition and sensations for the ancient Egyptian. For them, this whole sphere of consciousness is primarily in the heart and not in the brain. That is why the brain was thrown out. We recently discussed this, and the heart was very important for the Egyptian. Here is another scene from the sarcophagus when the nobleman in reverence touches the body of Osiris, whose symbol instead of a face is a stopjet, and the huge winged goddess Maat protects Osiris with her wings. In the Books of the Dead, in various museums, this funeral trial is shown. Here are all 42 gods. Now we look at the far right column, 2 Maat, both earthly and heavenly, then the deceased in reverence to Osiris, then Anubis weighing the heart, and the monster Amut waiting for the sentence. And below is the scene I have enlarged. Here he writes out the feather of the goddess Maat to create the truth, not only to speak about the truth, but also to create it. Here is another example from the Book of the Dead, when he appears in the image of an emerald peacock. Here are the scales, the heart, and the figure of the goddess Ma'at, and both Ma'at, both sisters, who are still standing on their symbol. The symbol is blue because the name of the goddess Ma'at is a bottomless lake full of clean water for the righteous and a cauldron full of fire for the unrighteous. At the same time, it remains the same. That is, it is the projection given by human consciousness and what it has developed, either one or the other. A very beautiful episode of the coffin trial of the great singer of the Cro-Magnon, Anne Hay. The 11th century BC, she is brought to the centre of the choir. Then she is justified and healed. She is shown here in all her hair and feathers. She is held in her arms, and her heart is in her wig. The goddess of the West, the great defender of the form of the goddess Hathor, holds her at the moment of healing. Here on the left is the court, and the goddess Maat is present in the extreme upper left corner of this British museum. Finally, the heart is weighed down, all actions are weighed down, and in this fragment from the papyrus of the priest Amir from the Turin Museum, at the moment of the heart's weighing down, he brings his mouth, everything he said, his mouth, his lips, and these two eyes, Ertia, Orfor in ancient Egyptian, is to act, to create, to act. Everything he did, everything he said, everything is weighed down here. And Anubis weighs down the measure of the scales. And again, the goddess Maat is present on one of these scales. And a very beautiful example from the Book of the Dead Natto. This is a British museum when everything has already passed. And he came to the most desired garden, and his wife is with him. And there is Osiris. Maat is sitting behind Osiris. The shape of the pedestal of Osiris we, of course, immediately saw. The sun is there too, and what is behind him is the very house that has always been waiting for him. I really like this image when in the afterlife the true house of your soul, and there on the windowsill a clay lamp burns as a sign that you have always been waiting there. This is the place where the ancestors, where all the loved ones, where everything that an Egyptian justified by the right-wing Mahiru should acquire with his right voice. A very beautiful last example from this body of beautiful illustrations of the Book of the Dead. After all, even in the text of the pyramids back then, a long time ago, in the era of the ancient kings, do you know what the king was very afraid of? He will rise to heaven. He will perform all the rituals. Everything will be fine. He will come to the sun god because he wants to become Shem-Sur, the companion of the sun god, and his place was taken. There were special spells about how not to give the place to the king that was intended for him in the god of millions of years. And this idea, which is based on the ancient Egyptian religious text, after millennia led to such beautiful illustrations. This is an illustration of papyrus of a noble lady, the famous singer Tayuhi Red. She became equal to the gods on the sunbed. First Mat, then him, then our heroine, then Atum, the god of the evening sun. And all this is completed by the great choir. You came out as a likeness of God, but you can become equal to the gods. And for the ancient Egyptian, the standard of posthumous existence, posthumous being, is to be equal to the gods of Ma'at. The concept of Uri includes the concept of work, the great doing of worldly truths that correspond to the world of gods. There is another very interesting place where we will spend just a little of our time. This is the Phyvon necropolis. Here are the great temples, the temple of Amezim, the temple of Amenhotep III, Medinetebu, and so on. I'm interested in what the blue arrow, this is Deir el Medzin. In ancient times, this place was called Stasit Mat, the place of truth. Painters who built royal tombs lived there. These people were amazing. We have the archives, correspondence, libraries. It is clear that they were deeply literate people. They built a temple for themselves. This temple was rebuilt several generations later. I will show you the reconstruction. This is how it looked, surrounded by barns. This is how it is shown from the aerial photography. Let's go to the great gate. If we go inside, behind this long fence that imitates a perpetual wave, there will be such a temple. And here's the temple for itself. People who knew all the secrets of the royal tombs and the sacred texts dedicated it to Kador and Mat, to the double principle of the great Mother of Gods. The temple began to flourish in the 1st and 2nd centuries. What has come to our time is the Ptolemaic structure. This is the 4th century BC. I will show you the interior. The yellow arrow shows the entrance. The temple itself is a part of a very large ancient structure. The central lighthouse, the green arrow, is the Kador and Mat lighthouse. The red lighthouse is the principle of the sun. This is Amun, Ra, and Zar. The blue arrow, the right lighthouse, is Saqqara Siris and the Great Tomb. These are the 3 main principles that these artists want to leave for themselves in their village. I will show you some images because this is the Temple of Mat. One of the Ptolemies, behind him is the goddess Mat, and the daughter of the sun, who unites with Amun, worships Mount, the falcon head of the ancient Phoenician god of war. The reliefs, despite the fact that this is the time of decline, are still interesting. The Tsar and the goddess Kador also worship one of the forms of the core, There are a lot of divine worships. My task is not to tell you so much as to give you a sense of this lighthouse, because our heroes will still be in the centre. So, the lighthouse of Osiris and Isis, the right one, will overcome death. Therefore, the scene of weighing the soul is depicted in the temple because it has never been done in the temple. There is a conventional wise man who came to the afterlife. And by the way, there are two mats around him. This is the heavenly mat, and that is the earthly mat that brought him from the earth. Here is the Sakara's boat. This is an understanding of death, because the Sakara's boat consists of the bones of animals. This is what feeds the stylized ribs. In the centre, there is a mountain of sand. Inside the sand, they put either an egg or a grain. The egg is dead, but alive inside. The grain is visually dead, but alive inside. There's no death as a fatal state, as a final state. There is a state of death as a dream in which life prevails before getting a new image. And accordingly, there are different deities here: Amon, Mut, Khonsu, Cathor, and Maat. Again, the most important deities for the artists who are present in their temple. And here is the central sanctuary, very beautiful, where the king brings the vessels, what to bring to the goddesses. Of course, incense. Cathor sits here first, and then Maat sits in a grand crown with falcon feathers. We could even confuse the goddess, but everything is signed. All her titles are here. When you leave this sanctuary, you see the rising of the sun. The sun rises, azure blue scarabs roll the red disc. The goddess's keepers and the famous pavians, the souls of the east, greet the rising sun on the eastern horizon. Maat in this late Egypt, in Egypt of many troubles, many problems in Egypt, where this ancient culture, she becomes the last great oracle goddess. We are in Kamomba. This is a temple in the very south of Egypt, not far from Aswan, a very beautiful temple which was also built by Ptolemy, but we are not talking about that. We will go to the back part and see such an amazing thing. This is a sanctuary that hears the call. Inside, behind this wall, there was an occult statue of the goddess, and anyone could come here to the territory of the temple. In this niche, there was a sitting figure of the goddess Maat with a feather on her head. Her admirers were scraped out. In the literal sense of the word, a fragment of flesh and stone was mixed into bread. Such a practice was in late Egypt. And here are the eyes of the goddess, ears of the goddess. The goddess sees you. The goddess hears you. Here she is in triumph, flying to the top. And in one hand she has the Ankh, life, and in the other hand she has a sail, Chow. She is the mother of life's breath. And at that moment when people were kneeling here, they came and asked what was wrong with them. A lot of sacrifices were made here. Next to her are the winds, because there are 4 sides of the world, and there are 4 winds with which Maat carries life. One wind is a body, the second wind is a lion, the third wind is a falcon or an eagle. The difference is only in the 4th wind. He had a snake, not a human head. It was from the cult of the goddess Maat that the basic iconography of future evangelists in the early Christian church in Egypt leads us here to the sanctuary of Maat, where we can hear the call to Kamomba. I promised you that at the very end we will hear the words of the most amazing ancient wise man, and therefore we return to Saqqara, to the steps of the pyramid of Djoser, the first pyramid of Egypt. And here once lived this amazing man. Fate loved him, because in the secret chamber of his tomb, 2 of his wooden statues, one of them is in front of you. It is now a masterpiece of the Hatep Museum in Saqqara. the feeling of a living person of the 24th century, a tree that was not even eaten by termites, which is quite amazing. And in the side of it is a papyrus, the same scroll in which his wisdom is, which I will read to you. We remember with you that K is a vital force, or a natural force, or a double world. We remember the names of the gods. What do I want to warn you from? Do not expect from the Hatep an incredible delight about universal justice. He does not have this delight. Expect from him the whisper of an old man, and he's quite old now, to his son, who will explain how to find fragments in this complex, problematic, sometimes impure life. The papyrus is a prize, and I will show you several interiors from his tomb. The wisdom of the head of the city and the vizier of Tahatep, under the majesty of the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Jekharai Saisi, may he live forever and ever. The head of the city and the vizier of Tahatep says, O ruler, my ruler, old age has come, weakness has appeared, and weakness comes to me again and again. It is hard to sleep because of this every day. My eyes are weak, my ears are deaf, my strength is fading because my heart is tired. My lips are silent, there is no speech in them. My heart is empty, it does not remember the day that is past. The bones hurt for a long time. What was good became bad. There is no more taste. What old age does to people. It is evil in everything. The nose is clogged. It does not breathe. It is hard to stand. It is hard to sit. Yes, it will be ordered to your servant to create a support for old age. Then I will tell him the words of people who know, the advice of my ancestors, those who heard the gods themselves. And yes, it will be then done for you like this, so that the burdens of ordinary people will be lightened for you, and both shores will serve you. Then said the greatness of this God, that is the king, teach him speech, first of all, and he will serve as an example for children to know, and obedience will enter him, and that in which he was warned, for there is no one who is born wise. The beginning of the speech of the beautiful, said by the noble prince, the divine father, the beloved God, the son of the Tsar's elder from his flesh, the head of the city, the vizier of Ptahhotep, in order to teach those who do not know the law the beautiful speech, for the benefit of those who will hear it, for the grief of those who will offend it. And then he said to his son, do not exalt your heart because of your knowledge. Ask for advice both from those who are not tempted by the heart and from those who know, for you will not reach the limits of your skill. The wise speech is hidden more than the little precious, and you will find it meanwhile among the servants that mill the grain with the millstones. If you meet the enemy in a dispute more powerful than you, put your hands together, bend your back, do not cross him, for he is not equal to you. Pray to him who speaks evil, do not hinder him in what he does, then he will be called ungrateful, when your calmness is equal to his wealth. If you meet the enemy in a dispute equal to you, be equal to him. Do not be silent if he speaks badly. If you meet the enemy in a dispute equal to you, do not be angry with him because of his weakness. Leave him on the ground. He will punish himself. Do not turn to him to ease your heart. Do not turn your heart to the one who is against you. The one who has weakened the poor heart is corrupt, and then what is in your heart, you will overthrow him by the counteraction of the nobles. If you are a leader, the one who gives orders to many, look for a charity until there is a defect in your advice. Great is my hail, it is constant, it has not been distorted since the time of Osiris, and punishes the one who bypasses the law but passes it by a greedy face. Sometimes they get wealth. Evil will never reach its goal. A criminal usually says, I am caught in a trap that I have set for myself. He cannot say to himself, I am caught in a trap because I am worthy of it. But everything always comes to an end for him. Only the curse remains. No one can say, this region belongs to my Father. Do not make plans. You are a human being. God punishes you for this. A human being sometimes says, I will live by this, but I am deprived of bread from my mouth. A human being sometimes says, I will be powerful, and then says, what I had in mind. A human being sometimes says, I will rob another, but comes to the conclusion that he gives to his stranger. Human plans do not come true, but what is ordered by the world of gods is done. Survive in the world, and you will get what the gods will give you. If you sit at the table of the one who is greater than you, accept what they give you, what they bring to your nose. Look at what is before you, but do not look at it too closely. It is bad for life to be hostile to your master. Do not address him with words until he calls you. It is not known what can become evil in the heart. Speak when he asks you, as then what you say will be good in his heart. When the Great One is busy with bread, he behaves as he pleases. He will give to those who he pleases what he pleases. Food is the property of God. Only the one who is stupid will judge it. If you are a man who enters freely, whom one Great One sends to another, be precise when he sends you. Make his message precise, as he said. Beware of harming with words what will anger one Great One against another. Follow the way of evil. Do not pass by it. Evil words are not what you should repeat. Do not speak ill of a man, any noble or simple one, for it is disgusting for the strength of your kind. If you make your entrance on the field, God will give it to you, so that it will be abundant in your hand, but do not saturate your mouth when your neighbours look at you. Great respect to the silent one. What does he seize before the man of a strict master of things like a crocodile when he comes to court? Do not despise the one who is childless. Do not humiliate. Do not boast of your children. There is a great father in misfortune, but it happens that the mother gave birth. But her happiness is different. The lonely man multiplies the phenomenon, serves God, and the head of the family first of all satisfies her desires. If you are small, serve the great man, and all your being will be pleasing to God. Do not learn about his poverty before. Do not raise your heart to him because of what you have learned about him. Respect him for what happened to him. Good does not come by itself. This is the law of the gods for those whom they love. As for wealth, he has accumulated it himself. God has made it prosperous. He protects it even when he is in a dream. Follow your heart while you exist. Do not do more than what was said. Do not shorten the period of following your heart, because it is disgusting to spend it in vain. Do not take more than is needed for your home to provide it. Wealth comes when you follow your heart, and it does not come when you neglect your heart. If you are a successful man, create a son so that he may bring grace from God. If he is decent and inclined to your character, your property will be kept in order. Then do all the good for him. He is your son. He is the influence of your life force. Do not take your heart away from him when he opposes your influence. If he goes astray, step over your advice and oppose everything that is said. If a foolish speech comes out of his mouth, punish him for all that he has said. Those who harm you are condemned by the gods. He is the one who is a scoundrel while still in the womb. He will not bow down to the one who is led by the gods. He will not find a crossing to the one who was deprived of a boat by the gods. If you are in the courtroom, act according to your rank, because it is determined for you on the first day. Do not break this order, for you will be detained. The one who came in and was informed as a watchman, he welcomes the one who is invited, but not the one who came himself. In the courtroom, everything is in order. The decision is as it should be. God is the patron of this place. He did not create people so that they had only a shoulder to lean on. If you are among people, make yourself a supporter as a worthy person who does not walk around the one who is driven by his demands. He becomes the boss himself. If you want to be rich, here is my advice. Become the one whose name is kind and does not deny you. Your body is nourished and your face is turned to the people around you. Their tailiness is what you do not know. The one whose heart is obedient to flesh and bones, he places unkindly a place of love to himself. Empty his heart, naked his body. Great are the hearts of those who are given by the gods, the one who is obedient only to flesh. If you are in power, report your orders, offer your thoughts to your master. If you are in power, and do what you have been ordered to do, do things that will be remembered in the future. The word of praise does not come faster than the hostility to the crocodiles. Those who reject the request talk about it. Why does he deny the truth? If you cannot do anything of what you are asked to do, your heart is smoothened when you listen kindly. If you want to prolong the friendship in the house, where you enter as a master, as a brother, or as a friend, wherever you enter, beware, woman. It is not good for the place where it happened when it opens up. Thousands of people neglected this good advice. A moment is short, a moment is like a dream, but they accept death knowing it. The word is mean. It is the enemy's arrow, but it continues to do it, although it is rejected by the heart. What can bring good to the loser, to the woman who is greedy? None of his plans. If you want your power to be good, save yourself from the evil of anyone. Fight your greed, for it is a severe disease, a snake disease. There is no cure for it. It quarrels with fathers, mothers, and brothers, divorces a wife and a husband. It is the source of all evil. It is a bag with all that is rejected. The existence of the one who observes Mat, the one who follows his rank, he makes his will, but there is no tomb for the greedy. Be content, for you will not be greedy, before what is not in your share. Do not be greedy to your kin, meaningful, short and strong. The one who neglects his kin is destroyed, deprived of what their words and little that a person wishes will give birth to an enemy from a heartless man. If you are successful, then build your house, love your wife passionately, fill her belly, dress her body, oil her body, rejoice her heart. It is a good tower for its master. Do not leave her, but do not give her power. When her eye looks, it is like a storm. Then she will live long in your house. Hold her, give her a stream of water, give her a stream of passion. Otherwise there will be a flood. Rejoice your loved ones with what you have gained, for this happened to those whom God favours. What about the one who avoids pleasing his loved ones? They say about such a self-loving K, it is not known what he will achieve on the next day. This good K is satisfied with his right essence. If what is praised is said by your loved ones, welcome them. I do not bring this peace to the harbour, but I bring it to my loved ones when you are ruined. Do not repeat the gossip as if you have not heard them, and not from the influence of a fiery heart. Repeat only what you have seen. If you have not heard it, do not speak at all. Look, your knowledge is beautiful, but there is a punishment for spreading gossip. They condemn the inclination to such a law. Destruction is for sleep. Avoid it. If you are a successful man, the one who has become the advisor of his master, gather for your significant heart. Be silent. It is more useful than healing herbs. Speak, knowing and understanding. Only the worthy has a word in the council. For the speech is more difficult than any work. Only the one who understands it controls himself. If you are powerful, then the fear before you is in the knowledge, in the calmness of speech. Do not ever submit an unworthy, unreserved example to your master. Do not be proud of your heart so that it does not become humiliated. Do not be silent, but watch where you're going. Respond to the speech of anger and drive the anger away from you. Behave like yourself. The flame of a burning heart destroys, but the path of kindness. The path is wide. He will not spend even a moment of kindness at home. The one who misses the fullness of life is like a sailor who has to push himself and sail again. His obedient heart will be in order. If you are knowledgeable and you meet in court, you are sent to help many. Do not be prejudiced in judgments. Do not be passionate when you speak. Take care not to be told that he speaks in favour of the nobleman, or the nobleman is passionate about his speech. Turn to justice. If you are merciful to what has happened, you value a person because of your honesty, then pass by him. Do not recognise him as it was the first day when he was silent before you. Do not rob a neighbour's house. Do not take the property of your neighbour. Do not call him to you until you hear it. This is an empty place for a strapped heart. If he knows it, he will be your enemy. It is bad to have a neighbour who is not your friend. You should not get together with a woman if you know that she is not inclined to this meeting in her heart. There is no satisfaction in what will not bring satisfaction to her corpse. You should not spend the night doing what is forbidden, for she will be satisfied only by destroying her heart. If you want to know the character of your friend, do not ask the person who is closest to him. Do business with him alone until you suffer from his morals. Argue with him as time goes by. Disturb him with the words of his heart. If what he saw leaves him, wait for his actions that will make you angry. But be friendly to him. Do not turn your face away from him. Hold yourself back. Open your words to him. Do not answer in a confused way. Do not run away from him. Do not trample on him. There is no such thing as not to make a mistake. No one will escape what is destined for him. Be generous while you exist. What came out of the barn? The bread that is given by greediness over it. The one whose coffin is empty, the accuser, is a loser because he was deprived of it. He does not do it out of generosity. Here is a good memory of a man after he was in power. Remember your old companions, and you will be rich. Your relations with your friends will not be low. They are fertile pastures that should make you great, for more than all your values, the things of one person are useful for another. The noble nature of a person is good. Remember it. Punish him for his deeds. Educate him in everything. The punishment of an offence is an example for the family. What turns an innocent person into an angry one? It is good for the future to hear what the future hears. If a good thing happens due to the existence of the future, it will be prosperous forever. The one who is wise will take care of his soul and will make it beautiful on earth. The one who does evil is free from lies. It is good for the future to hear what the future hears. He becomes a listener to those who listen. A good listening is the basis of a good speech. A listener is the master of benefit, for a listener is useful for a listener. It is good for the future to hear what the future hears. How good it is if a son accepts the words of his father. Then the old age in love, God loves those who listen. God hates those who don't listen. This heart turns its master into a listener or a non-listener, for the life, prosperity and health of a person are hidden in his heart. Be an example. Don't let people discuss you. Strengthen your mother tongue and let your offspring live. First, always stand up against esophagus. Then people who see it will say, he is truly like his father. Then people who hear it, he is truly like his father. Bow your heart when you speak. Say excellent things. Then the nobleman will say how wonderful it is that it comes out of his mouth. Do so that your master would say about you, how good he is, how good this man who was raised by his father is. When you reach my age with a healthy body, and the king will be pleased with everything that has happened, you will gain many years of life. Not a small thing that I have done on earth. I have gained 110 years of life, given to me by the king. Praise me more than praise those who were before me for what I did for the king in the place of reverence. With some bills, but such a fantastic thing. The translation I finished at 6 a.m. is an absolute pleasure, because it is not a conversation about the truth of the great temple, although it is also there. It is a conversation, a whisper, as I probably said correctly at the very beginning, of the old father who understood something in his 110 years and decided to tell his son how to reach the shore without leaving it in order to sail back.